Good morning, everybody. This is Billy Trout with the Tennessee Department of Revenue. On behalf of our Commissioner David Jaragino, we want to welcome you to our presentation today of a new business tax workshop. I know you guys are excited to be here, and we're excited to be with you. Along with me today, we'll have our education expert and webinar extraordinarily great presenter. That's you, Katie, if you don't know who I'm talking about. It's Katie Julian, and we're very glad to have her on board, as we always are. Um, we're going to go through a lot of information today with you. I'm going to be sort of in the background, kind of monitoring chat when we do open up our chat sessions and that kind of thing. And Katie and I will address as many of your questions as we can as we go along. Katie's going to be your main presenter, and she's going to go through the information there. And of course, we do want you to get a copy of the materials there if you wish to, and Katie will direct you right there with a little QR code. Hopefully, you can take your little phone out and scan that and kind of follow along. If not, we have the materials online as well. So I'll be quiet for a while and let Katie take over. Thanks a bunch for coming today, guys.
Hey everyone, thank you, Billy. Glad to have you all here today. As Billy said, we're going to be opening up chat just a few times during the workshop. This is a really long workshop. It's 3 hours, so we're going to kind of break it up into some sessions. We'll about halfway through have a actual stop break where we can step away from the computer and everything. Um, So again, like we said, this is our new business workshop. We offer this quarterly. Um, little bit changes each time. So if you've been with us before, you'll notice some changes in this workshop. In our next workshop, we may know a lot more because our general session will be wrapping things up by the time we have this again in April. And every year there's new tax laws. So if you're a business owner, a new business owner, or maybe a tax professional that helps businesses with their taxes, maybe you've been in business for a little while and you're just learning about this workshop that we have and you're wanting to make sure you've got everything going on. Glad to have you here. Things do change all the time. We make things better. We improve our processes. Plus, there's law changes. So, a little bit about the way things are going to go for today. We are going to spend about 3 hours together. So, it's a long workshop. If we really wanted to dive into a lot of detail, we could probably make this a week-long workshop. But in 3 hours, we're really just going to be touching on the basics. The first little small session we're going to have is going to be dedicated to setting up your business. So if you're already set up, if your business is already set up, this will be a way to make sure that you did everything the way you should, dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. If you haven't gotten set up yet, this will be a good resource to get set up. Then we're going to stop for just a minute and open up the chat and take your questions about just those topics that we talked about during the setting up your business. Then we're going to move into talking about basic tax law. We're going to focus on the big three tax types that we have: business tax, sales tax, and F&E tax. We're going to let you know where to go for the other ones too. Your business may require another tax type, but we're not going to focus on those today. We're just going to talk about the basics of the big three. We're going to go over to our website and go and walk through some basic webinars that we've actually already and recently held on those business tax, sales tax, and F&E tax. So we'll be showing you, we're going to be going to our website a lot, actually. That's one of the things we really want to impress upon you is how much information we have on our website. So much that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So one of the goals of today is to take some of that guesswork out of it and show you where to go fast. You may be working on, have a tax question on a weekend or something when we're not here. You can find most answers on our website. We've got great customer support, our call center, and our team that answers your emails and your help tickets are awesome, but we're not here all the time, unfortunately, or actually fortunately for us, right? But so we have a really robust website though, and we're going to spend a lot of time taking you over there throughout this whole workshop. Again, sharing those resources for you, showing you how to work through TinTap, which is our online filing. Let me go back for just a minute here. When we go through the taxes, we are going to take a small little break, not a break, we're not going to step away, but we're going to do a chat session after each of those 3 tax types because it can be kind of confusing to mix them up, and we're going to be throwing a lot of information at you. If there is time at the end, we will open things back up for more chat and questions from you, but we'll just see how the timing goes. All right, so the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is setting up a new business. We have a great resource on our website that we started a couple years ago. So a few years in, we've made it better and better as well. And I'm going to take you directly over there right now. What you see right here is a screenshot there. If you have opened the PDF that we pointed you all to at the beginning of this session, then this is actually a link that will take you over to this page. And also when I get over there, I'm going to show you this really cool checklist we have. So with that, we'll take a little field trip here and go over to the revenue website. All right, so revenue website is tn.gov/revenue. And I want this to become your friend, our website. I think we have one of the best revenue and tax websites of any of the states. I've done my homework and checked a lot of other states out, and ours is really well done. But the thing is, there's just so much information, so knowing what is where is key. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the website later, but first I'm going to take you straight over to this section that's specifically for new businesses and talks about setting up your website. So from this main page, we're going to scroll down, looking at these tiles here. We'll explore those later, but down towards the bottom of the tiles, there's this tile that says for businesses. We're going to click there and then click on the tile for new businesses. All right, here's the checklist I was telling you about. We're going to go back and look at that in just a minute. But first thing we're going to do is click on this first tile that says setting up a business. And it is going to walk us through some basics, such as establishing your business name and address, what type of structure your entity is going to have. Do you need to register with the Secretary of State or not? The importance of determining your business start date. Do you need an EIN, a federal employer identification number? Maybe, maybe not. Identifying your NAICS code, determining your tax year, and your directors, officers, and shareholders if that is required for your entity type. So let's just kind of work through each of these, starting with the top. And I want to repeat again, if you are already set up and you realize while you're listening to this today that maybe you've done something wrong, we can help you fix that. But it's important to get on top of that and fix it, because if you are set up incorrectly, or you think maybe you've given us one entity ID and given the Secretary of State another one, or that's just one example. That's something we need to get to the bottom of and fix and make sure that everything is set up correctly. So first things first here, establishing your business name. Here's a link that you can see to visit the Small Business Association's website for tips on how to select a business name, and also a link over to the Tennessee Secretary of State's business name availability database. I will say, if you are a sole proprietorship, which we're going to talk about entity types here in a few minutes. For sole proprietors, your tax account with us, with the Tennessee Department of Revenue, is going to be in your personal name, and it's going to be in your personal social security numbers, your personal social security number as well. And then you will just have a DBA, doing business as, for your tax account. For corporations, for other types of entities, your business name is what your tax account is, the name your tax account will be under. And business name is something that you can change. You can make a change to that. But again, that's something you want to make sure gets done across all the different entities that you deal with. It's kind of confusing. We'll share some resources here in a little while, but here in Tennessee, there's a lot of different places you have to go when you start a business. Not just Department of Revenue, not just your county clerk's office or your city clerk's office. Tennessee Secretary of State, maybe getting a license through the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. We're going to try to take some of the guesswork out of that for you. You're going to want to establish what your business addresses. Building, as you can see here, building structures of brick and mortar will have a physical location address. If your business is online, your location address is the physical place where your records are maintained. This is likely going to be for a lot of people, if it's a home-based business, it is going to be your home address, your physical home address. The way taxes are allocated here in Tennessee, that's how we know how to allocate a portion of the taxes that you remit to us to your jurisdiction where you live or where your business is located. Very important here, you see a business location address cannot be a post office. It also cannot be one of the mailing services like the UPS store has, those are considered post offices too. It needs to be the physical place where your records are maintained. Your mailing address, when you do get set up, and we'll talk about registering a little bit later, but when you are registering, that location address is where the physical location is, again, including your home. Your mailing address can be a PO box. It can be different. It's where you want to receive letters or other important documents from us. If you're a big company, you may actually also have what we call a primary address as well, but we won't get into that too much right now, but just so you know, your mailing address can be different from your location address. We may have some out-of-state businesses in here with us today. There's a lot of people joining us. If you are out of state, what I'm going to recommend to you, and there's another time here in a little while that I'll talk about this again, but we have a whole webinar dedicated to out-of-state businesses because things are a little bit different for y'all. The way you register, the way what addresses we use, because a lot of times you won't have a physical location here in Tennessee. So more on that in our Nexus for Out-of-State Businesses webinar, and I'll show you where the webinars are here in a little while. All right, so this is a big one, determining your business structure or entity type. This is something that we cannot help you with. You must decide this on your own. Sometimes we get calls about, well, you know, what do you all think I should be? This is something where you may want to get some legal advice. You may want to turn to some other people you know who have started businesses before, but you don't want to just make this decision willy-nilly, so to speak. You want to really think through this. You can click on the drop down for each of these entity types to learn a little bit more about them. Sole propriety, for example, sole proprietorship, for example, is just one individual in business alone. It is the most common form of structure. And like I mentioned, the primary entity number for a proprietorship is the social security number of that sole person. And the ownership information that we need to open up your tax accounts with the state of Tennessee is going to be that social security number of the owner. You may have an FEIN because if you have employees or you wanted to get an EIN for other purposes, but when it comes to setting up your tax accounts with us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and at your clerk's office, if you're a sole proprietor, you need to set that up using your social. That is one of the number one reasons that new businesses get things confused with their tax accounts is that they say they're a sole proprietor, but they use an EIN to get set up with us. We can fix that for you. So if you're on here and you did that, we can get that fixed for you. But it's important to get set up sole proprietorship using a social. An additional type of sole proprietorship is a marital joint account. You can set that up together, and the account will be set up in the primary entity number is the primary spouse, a social security number of the primary spouse. You can choose which you want that to be, but you will be joint owners. All right, so partnership. I'm just kind of scrolling through these. I want you to spend some more time later if you're undecided about what kind of entity you want to be. Scroll through this a little bit more later, but just the basics here. General partnership is comprised of two or more people who agree to contribute money, labor, and or skill to the business. Each partner shares profits, losses, management, so on and so forth. The primary entity number for a partnership is the entity's EIN, the federal EIN, Federal Employer Identification Number. That is something you obtain from the from the IRS. The federal name is a general partnership, and ownership information, name and social security number, if available, of each owner is needed. Limited partnership or limited liability partnership is a business type composed of one or more general partners and one or more limited partners. General partners have full management and control of the business and have full personal responsibility of all debts and liabilities of the business. The limited partners have no personal responsibilities for debts and liabilities beyond the amount of their investment interest and cannot participate in management of daily operations. The primary entity type number for a partnership for Department of Revenue purposes is going to be the FEIN. An LLC, limited liability company. We've got a single member limited liability, an SMLLC. It's one individual or entity through a special written agreement and has one member. Excuse me. The primary entity number for this single member LLC can either be the owner's social security number or the entity's FEIN, either one. There's also a multi-member LLC that is formed by one or more individuals or entities through a special written agreement. Primary entity number when setting up your tax account is going to be the EIN of the LLC. Now, when you're setting up the tax accounts, you will need the each person's social security number for setting it up. A professional limited liability company, these are going to be your professional companies like law, doctor's offices, accounting firms. Basically, it's formed under a state professional LLC law and is engaged in rendering of professional services. That will be set up using the EIN as well in our system. Corporations have a more complex business structure for sure. As a chartered legal entity, a corporation has its own rights, privileges, and liabilities. Doing business as a corporation can yield tax or financial benefits, but these can offset by other considerations such as increased fees or decreased personal control. We're going to touch on this later, but just so you know, most of these entity types other than the sole proprietorship are going to be liable for what we call F&E tax, franchise and excise tax. That's one thing to consider. A lot of people think, oh, I need to become an LLC. I need to, well, just so you know, once you do become an LLC, that starts that faucet, turns that on, and you will be liable for franchise and excise tax in addition to other tax types as well. But a sole proprietorship does not need a franchise excise tax account. And then, of course, nonprofits. That's a business that's been granted tax exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. Those are registered using the EIN of the nonprofit. So again, we can't help you determine what type of entity type to be, but it's something you need to determine before you start registering with different, registering your business across several places and getting licenses and permits and all that kind of stuff. You can change your entity type, but that is also something that requires a change to the tax account. You don't just want to switch it over without letting us know. There are tax implications there. So registering your business with the Tennessee Secretary of State. If you're a corporation, partnership, an LLC, a business trust that's chartered, organized in Tennessee, you need to register with the Secretary of State and file annual reports with the Secretary of State. And again, the other tax liability there for you in Tennessee is going to be a franchise and excise tax. If you are one of these types of businesses, you'll need to register with the Secretary of State and with us for franchise excise tax. We do share data with the Secretary of State. So if you register with them, we'll know, okay, that person should be coming here to set up an F&E account with us. And if you register with the Secretary of State but have not yet registered for your franchise and excise or F&E tax account with us, you may get a letter in the mail saying, hey, we see you've registered with the Secretary of State. We need you to register for a franchise excise tax account, and vice versa. I'm not sure how it works on their end, but if you open up a franchise and excise tax account with us, you probably need to go register with them. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk details about F&E. Determining the effective business start date is also something that sounds like pretty simple, but you'd be surprised how many people get where that gets confused across the various different places where you're registering. The effective business start date is the date that tax obligation begins. So if you have chartered with the Secretary of State prior to registering with us, you're going to use the effective date of that charter, even if you haven't officially started or opened the doors, so to speak. If you've chartered with the Secretary of State, we need to use that as your start date. Applying for that EIN number, that is something, as I mentioned, that you do through the IRS. These are links over to IRS's website to let you know if you need an EIN number. If you are a sole proprietor and you do not have employees, you probably don't need an EIN number, but I'm still going to refer you over to the IRS guide about that. Again, even if you are a sole proprietorship and you have an EIN number, very important that you register for your tax accounts using your Social Security number, not your EIN. And when I say tax accounts, I also mean your licenses. Um, if you go to the clerk's office to get a business license before you come to us and you're a sole proprietorship, it needs to be in your social. So you need to identify your NAICS code. That's the North American Industry Classification System code. That's a question when you are registering with the Tennessee Department of Revenue that will ask you. And on our website, when you go to register, there's a little drop down. It's pretty simple to figure out what your NAICS code is. It basically is just what type of business you are. Are you new clothing, used clothing, vehicles, advertising, and any kind of industry that you're in, there will be a NAICS code for it. Um, Usually, I will tell you, this came into play during COVID it's very important to get this right with us. During COVID, when there was relief funds issued to certain types of businesses like restaurants, salons, that was the way the NAICS code was how we knew what type of business needed to get those funds was just solely through the NAICS code. So make sure you've got that right. Um, and it's if you have a lot of different types of things that your business does or sells, the NAICS code is going to be based on the primary, what type of business you are engaged in the most. Determining your fiscal tax year, definitely very important here. It's going to dictate what your tax due dates are. So very important to figure that out. That again is something that only you can determine, and it is going to be how you figure out your taxable income, whether it's a calendar year, which is 12 months, beginning January 1st and ending December 31st, or a fiscal year, which is 12 consecutive months ending on the last day of any month except for December. Just make sure that, again, that is set up the same across all the different places where you're setting your business up. Also, identifying directors, officers, and shareholders. This is definitely typical for corporation structure. This is something when you're registering, you will include information about directors, officers, and shareholders. And again, this is something that can change over time and that you need to make sure you update as it changes. Okay, we are going to, before we go back over to the PowerPoint, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to click on this worksheet. So we're back on the new businesses main page. We just came out of setting up a business. I'm going to click on this printable worksheet here and just show you. Might be a good idea for you to go to this and just make sure you've got all this information together. All right, this would be a very good idea to fill this out. This is a fillable PDF for you. Fill this out maybe even before you get going, before you go to the clerk's office, before you get on the Secretary of State's website, before you get on our website to start registering. Make sure you've got all of this figured out. It's just a little checklist for you. We're not going to go into licenses and permits and your tax accounts for a few more minutes, so we'll get to that, but we just went through all of the stuff in step one. Okay, so back to our presentation here. We just covered setting up a business, getting set up right now. We're going to talk a little bit about getting your licenses and permits. On that web page where we just were, you can click there, but I've created a chart that kind of puts it all into one place for you. So A business license is something that you will obtain from your city or clerk's office. I'm sorry, county or city clerk's office. Most businesses, with few exceptions, we'll talk about those later, are going to need a business license. We're focusing here mainly on in-state businesses. There's two different types of business licenses, a minimal license and a standard license. We're going to talk about that later, but most businesses are going to need a business license, just a few exceptions. Um, chartering or getting your business registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State, you go directly to the Secretary of State's website for that. They have an online registration. And like I said a few minutes ago, this is required for partnerships, corporations, LLCs, business trusts. All will have to charter and register through the Secretary of State. To get that federal employee identification number, you're going to go directly to the IRS for that. It is needed for partnerships, corporations, LLCs, and business trusts, and businesses with employees, regardless of structure. And again, I'm going to repeat this one more time. If you're a sole proprietor, even if you have an FEIN, you'll register with us using your social. If you have employees, you're also going to need unemployment insurance and you'll pay an unemployment insurance tax. It is, this is a little bit confusing. It's one of the taxes that we do not handle here in Tennessee. It's one of the Tennessee taxes that's handled through another agency, and that's the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. So you'll need to go to their website for information. Again, if you have employees, payroll, you will handle that through the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Some professions, such as contractors, cosmetologists, insurance agents, need a professional license. Those licenses, that is different than your business license. It's called a professional license, and it is something that is handled through the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. I will say that there are a few professions where having a professional license in those professions does prompt the requirement for a tax that we have here with the Department of Revenue called the professional privilege tax. And that has changed a lot over the past few years, and we have an upcoming webinar about that tax. If you need an alcohol license, that is obtained through the Tennessee ABC, and that is if you're going to be selling alcoholic beverages for consumption on the premises. That's handled through them, but we work, again, very closely with them because there is a tax type. There's actually a lot of different alcohol taxes, but specifically for consumption on the premises, there's the liquor by the drink tax, and that's a webinar that we have we're holding later this month. So if you're a business that's going to be selling alcoholic beverages for consumption on premise, join us for that. And then all of your tax accounts, Tennessee state tax accounts, are going to be handled through the Tennessee Department of Revenue. Most businesses, with very few exceptions, are going to be required to at least register with us, if not pay taxes. So we're going to be touching on that in just a little while. Again, we're going to be diving into business tax accounts here in a little while, but just when it comes to these initial steps of getting set up, we're going to open up the chat in just a second. Actually, let me go ahead and do that real quick. So you can send a question just to Billy or myself now regarding what we just talked about, getting your business set up, entity type, fiscal year, choosing your fiscal year, your business start date, choosing your business name, where to get certain licenses and permits. Put your questions in the chat right now about that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go over just a few other resources we want to share with you here that are really great for if you are just now getting started in your business or have already gotten started. Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, the Tennessee ECD, has a fantastic resource that's called their Smart Start Guide. Here's a link to it, and they actually have a portal that kind of is a little bit like a wizard that will walk you through some yes/no questions to help you. The Tennessee Small Business Development Center has a website. The Small Business Development Center is a network of centers that provide counseling and training to help small businesses. So a great resource there. Um, let's see here. The SCORE Association. Oh, back to the Small Business Development Center. They also have great resources on their website, such as a step-by-step business planning workbook and some other things, some really cool resources. SCORE Association, you see their website there is score.org. This is volunteer business counselors, advisors, and mentors who offer either free or very low-cost counseling throughout the whole U.S., but we have local ones here in Tennessee throughout the state that can help you. Their website also has a couple really cool resources. One is called the Startup Roadmap. And then something you don't want to think about right now is you're starting your business, but simple steps to exiting your business, which is a really good resource they have on their website. The Small Business Association. I'm sorry, I always do that. Small Business Administration, SBA.gov, has information on their website like funding programs, federal contracting. They have some great learning platforms as well as local assistance. So check those out if you're a new or thinking about starting a business. I have a good friend who's one of my coworkers at Department of Revenue who's active in SCORE and is just really sings their praises. All of these are great resources, but uh, really look into that because the mentors, the business mentors you have there, that's invaluable. So um, before we move on to talking about our tax accounts, what's going on, Billy, in the chat? Has anybody put any questions about these first steps or anything we've talked about up to this point?
Looks like you have done a good job about getting people thinking this morning, Katie. So I just thought we'd go through these because there's not been a ton, but the
Okay.
ones that have been asked are pretty good. The first question, Katie, is will I be able to get CPE credit for this webinar, this presentation?
Yeah, sure. For the tax professionals that are on here, when you leave the uh, webinar here in a few hours, there will be a question on the exit survey that says, do you need CPE credit for this? And then if so, you'll have to put the name that you want listed on your CPE certificate. So yes, you can get credit. You just got to make sure to answer yes to the question as you answer the little survey when you leave.
Perfect, perfect. Patricia had a question about DBAs and LLCs. I can kind of touch on that. So essentially, when you register with the Department of Revenue, we're going to need your official names that you are registered with the Secretary of State for your LLC, corporation, or whatever. But your DBA name, we just need what it is. It doesn't really make much difference what your DBA name is. Now, the Secretary of State does have certain requirements regarding naming and regulations like that. So we would want you to probably check with them to see if the name that you're trying to use is a registered trademark name in Tennessee. Okay. I don't think you could oh, I don't know. Let's just say I don't think it's a good idea for you to call yourself Walmart. Okay. Because I think we have a few Walmarts around. So, that sort of thing. But that's a Secretary of State thing and not so much a Department of Revenue thing. Um, let's see what
I
else.
just had a flashback memory while you're looking at those. Remember back in the days of the yellow pages and how many businesses wanted their business to start with the letter A? So that
Right.
was the first thing you
Right.
saw in the yellow
Yeah.
pages?
Hey, for young people that are on here, Yellow Pages were phone books that you had under an actual phone. No, not your cell phone, an actual
Yep,
phone.
a book.
Okay. Some of y'all are probably laughing, but anyway, we're old and we can talk about stuff like
Yeah.
that. Okay, how do you change a NAICS code if it's wrong or if it's changed? Basically, contact us.
Hmm.
Just send us an email. Katie and I will share the revenue.support email address with you later. That's the best way to do it. Just let us change it for you. It's a piece of cake. It's very easy to do. You might be able to do it on TinTap. I'm trying to remember, Katie. Do you know? I'm not sure if you can or not.
I don't think so, honestly. I can't don't quote me on that, but I
It's
don't recall
it's
that that's
easy for
something.
us. It's
Yeah,
and a NAICS code is important, but it's not like super
critical.
important.
Yeah.
It's not going to prevent you from doing anything you need to do and paying tax or filing tax. But it's a good idea to kind of keep it up to date. So Carly, thank you for that question. Um, Are we going to do a webinar regarding out-of-state business nexus?
I'm going to put the link to that in
Hmm.
the chat right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the link to the actual webinar, the recorded webinar, but there'll also be a PDF of that. And later here in a little while, we'll show you where those are. But for now, there is a link to the uh, out of state nexus webinar.
Okay. And while you're doing that, Katie, thank you for doing that too.
Okay.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of questions about that. And if you have questions, let us know too. Paige asked a question about whether the steps outlined on the checklist, you showed them that little checklist deal, if you've determined if they've been completed or not. I don't know of a way that we can tell you per se. What we can do, if you call us or send us an email and you want to know what you've registered for, or you
Mhm.
just don't understand, or you're not seeing something that you ought to see, just give us a buzz. We, our call center is really kind of weird. And get this, we're the government call center that actually answers the phone, and they are live human beings. Most of them anyway, except for Katie. But we have a good staff. We've got several dozen people on the phones at any particular time during every business day that are very eager to help you. I think you'll be very surprised if you contact us and we actually are there being helpful, or as helpful as we can be in a confusing situation
Yeah.
for you. But
Especially when
yeah,
you're
we
getting
want to.
started. I mean, it can be
Yeah.
confusing and you're doing a lot, not just all this tax stuff and structures. You're working with marketing and hiring and all kinds of stuff. So making sure that you're on the same page with what you need to get done. Not a bad idea, like Billy said, just to go ahead and give us a call to make sure, some people don't realize that if you sign up for a standard business license at your clerk's office, that registers you automatically for a business tax account. We'll talk about that
Hmm.
in a little while, but things like that can be confusing. So
Hmm.
couldn't hurt just to give us a call. Like Billy said, we can walk through a lot of that with you and make sure we're all on the same page. Good idea there.
Another question is, what's a business license? Is that the same thing as an F&E account? We're going to pretty much touch on that in a little bit.
Hmm.
So stay tuned on that one.
It
Okay.
is something
And it's
people get
not.
confused a
And it's
lot
not, by
about.
the way,
Yeah,
just to let you know.
it's not. Yeah.
Does a small home base reseller business need a business license? Probably, Andy. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Hmm.
Okay. Unemployment. Our unemployment, if you pay about 1099, do you still need this? I don't know. We're not the unemployment people,
Going to
like Katie
remind you
said.
here,
Hey,
the
hey, you got to
Tennessee
talk to,
Department of Labor.
yeah, talk to them. Sorry about that, Lynn. We just don't know. Okay. Sorry.
Not
I
our
mean,
lane.
we're kind of being smart. We shouldn't be so smart, Katie. We
Don't
don't know
speak for
everything.
yourself. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Different rules for out-of-state businesses operating in Tennessee. What if we operate from Tennessee but provide services outside the state? Yeah. So when you file either sales tax or business tax with us, even franchise and excise taxes, there are issues to consider whether you're physically or economically located in our state. And when you do things outside the state, sometimes they are not taxable to Tennessee. I'm not going to get too lost in the weeds on that, but it there are considerations. How about that? That you need to take into account. Okay, so we can talk more about that a little bit later. Can lawyers use a LLC or PLLC? That's sort of a legal question, lawyer people. So you probably want to look that up. We're not as familiar with that as we are. We're going to pretty much put down what you register as. So you might want to research that before you register.
I think we should go ahead and move along to these. A lot of the questions I see here are about. Wow, we got a lot of questions. We're definitely not going to be able to get to all of them right now, but a lot are
Right.
about business tax. One thing I do want to touch on real quick from Paige. Do you need a registered agent for a physical address if you're a home business? Okay, registered agents. You can use a registered agent. You can, that's totally your call, but uh, business address, your location address needs to be where you are based out of. So if that is your home, then it does need to be your home address, not your registered agent's business address. Sometimes
Yes.
that gets confused.
Yes. Let me touch on a couple things, Katie, and I know that we're going to have to skip some of these because of time. BOI filing is a federal filing. We have nothing to do with that, so we're not going to be able to comment on that, Nikita. But we do appreciate your question. Um, there's many other questions on here that we're probably not going to be able to touch on because of the volume. But anyway, we're going to tell you how to ask your question and get a straight answer from a human being, either by phone or by our email service. So we're going to be touching on that too. And we're going to particularly be talking about business tax now. So this is the part where I be quiet and Katie starts about business tax. So go ahead, Katie. Katie, no audio. I'm not hearing you.
Well, I wasn't saying anything important anyways.
Oh, very good. I got you.
Okay. We're going to turn off chat for just a minute or a few minutes while we're talking about business tax, and then we'll open it back up to discuss questions that you have just about this tax type in particular. So we are going to actually take another little field trip and go over to our website and walk through. And the reason we used to, for this new business workshop, we used to have slides about business tax basics. But what we're really trying to move towards here with this workshop is showing you where the resources are on our website. So that you can always go to them and always refer back to them. And we have a business tax basics webinar. If you have the PDF of this presentation in front of you, you can click on this. I don't recommend doing that right now because it'll start, Billy and I will start talking and then you'll get really confused because it's an actual recording of that webinar. But for future, that's a recording. What we're going to go through right now is the PDF link for all of our webinars. We have a video recording of it and then the PDF of it. We're going to be just walking through that PDF. So I'm going to go back over to our website. Again, to the top here, Department of Revenue, tn.gov/revenue. We're going to scroll down. This is where we just were for businesses. Now over here, taxpayer education and outreach. If you registered for this workshop, you've already visited here because you went right here to new business workshops and registered for today's workshop. But where I'm going to take you right now is over to tax webinars. Just so you know how this page works, we have a free tax webinar that's the last Tuesday of every month. We only have registration open for one at a time for the current one. So the last Tuesday this month, January 28th, is our liquor by the drink tax webinar. You can register for that by clicking here. You can see the upcoming webinars that we have. Already mentioned to you that we have one coming up for business tax deductions. You can see here military service members, taxes for wineries, distilleries, breweries, professional privilege tax that I was mentioning to you that certain professional licenses require. This is going to be a really good one coming up in June, how to close your business. All you starting new businesses don't want to think about that right now, but it's really important to just know that that's going to be out there for one of these days, long time from now. When you close your business, you want to do it right because you don't want to end up owing fees and penalties and interest and having open accounts. So that'll be helpful. So continue on down here. We've got this webinar video library, and we have 65 webinars that we have done so far. So we are very dedicated to these webinars and providing the education to you guys. As I was telling you, you can click on the webinar video here in the video title here, these links that you see in the first column, the tax type that it's regarding, and then the PDF that goes along with that webinar. And this will just tell you the month and year, but I'm going to search here for the word basic right now. Because that's what we're going to be going through is business tax basics. Okay, so I'm not going to click on the video. I'm going to click on the PDF of the business tax basics webinar. And we will update these as major changes happen. We just had a major change to business tax, major law change a couple years ago, but we have done this webinar. We redid this webinar after that change. So these basics webinars will always be a good place for you to go back and see the basics. But I do want to just say there's a caveat, and that is that the information in all of our webinars is current as of the date presented and may not reflect every single legislative or subsequent change that happens to that tax type. And I'll show you later where our tax manuals are and our help articles, and also where you can read about the new laws. Those are good resources as well for you. But these webinars are very helpful. So I'm going to just kind of scroll through here. I'm not going to go through every single slide here because we'll be here all day. But the first few slides in the Business Tax Basics webinar are kind of focusing on Nexus. Most in-state businesses are going to are going to be liable for business license at least, and then if they make over 100 for business tax, we'll talk about that. But for out-of-state businesses, I'm going to refer you to finding out about Nexus in that webinar that I posted in our chat just a little while ago, talking about substantial Nexus here. Just kind of scrolling through, not to confuse you, but we're gonna get going right here. Business tax and licensing. So the business tax in Tennessee, and somebody asked a question earlier in the chat, like, is that the same as franchise excise tax? Those are two separate tax types. The franchise and excise tax is a tax on businesses, but it's its own thing. F&E, franchise excise tax. Business tax is a different tax type. That's what we're talking about now. The business tax and your business license are tied in together. All right, this little chart tells you a little bit about how they're tied in together. You see in this first column here, we're going to be talking about annual gross sales and where those fall, what type of license is needed, whether business tax is required for that, and how to renew it. So let's get going here with looking at just under 3,000 in annual gross sales. And that is the before any deductions. If your business grosses under 3,000, at that point, we're going to call that kind of maybe a hobby, right? Or maybe you just got started and haven't had time to do any more than that. No business license is required under 3,000 gross. Doesn't mean you can't get one if you don't want, if you want one for to hang in your building, or if you want one to open up a business bank account. If you need a license, you can get one, but you don't need one. Tax law says you do not need a license or business tax account under 3,000. So since you're not going to have a tax account, obviously there's no need to renew that. Now, if you have annual gross sales between 3,000 and 100,000, you will need a minimal business license from your local county. And then if you live in a municipality that requires you to get a license, you'll need to get one from there as well. A minimal business license. This was the big change I was telling you about that happened in 2023. The Tennessee Works Tax Act made sweeping changes to a lot of different taxes, but especially for business tax, maybe the biggest change we've ever had. That used to be 10,000. What you now see is 100,000, used to be 10,000. Now for between 3,000 and 100,000 annually, just a minimal business license, no business tax required. So a lot of you on here, this is going to be good information for you to listen to about business tax. So in the next few minutes about business tax, but you may not even be required to register for and file business tax, because you're going to be making grossing, I should say, under 100 annually. Keep that in mind, and that's something you can also change. That minimal business license will be renewed directly through your clerk's office. Since there are so many more people having minimal business licenses now, that threshold has increased. I know a lot of clerks are offering renewal online for that, so just check with your local county or local municipality for how to renew that license. And the license expiration date too is something that you'll work directly with your clerk on. Okay, so over 100,000 in annual gross sales, you'll need what's called a standard business license from your clerk. It also prompts the requirement for you to file an annual business tax return. Okay, we communicate, just like I was telling you earlier, how we communicate with the Secretary of State. The Tennessee Department of Revenue also communicates with the local clerk's offices as well. We know their system is tied into ours. When you obtain that standard business license, it actually registers you for a business tax account. A lot of people don't know that. We tell the clerks to tell you that, and you're going to get a letter in the mail from us saying, "Hey, if you've received a license, you need to file business tax now." But just so you know, if you obtain that standard business license, you already have a business tax account. If you don't know about that, that's one of those reasons to call us. You may have a letter may have gotten lost in the mail about that. Call us because you need to get you set up for you to be able to file on TINTAP. If you started with us and came directly to us and registered for a business tax account before you went to a clerk's office, you'll still need to go to that clerk's office to get your business license. So filing your annual business tax return to us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, is what makes you eligible to get renewed by your clerk. The clerks actually do the business license renewing. They have to kind of, so to speak, push a button on their end, but we let them know, yes, this business filed and is in good standing with us. You can issue that renewed license. We've got just in a couple months, it's going to be most businesses are going to be filing their business tax returns because it is based on your fiscal year end of December 31 fiscal year end. Businesses will need to file on April 15th for business tax. So if you think you may have gotten a standard business license and you don't know anything about a business tax account, please call us. We'll help you get that fixed. It may be that you didn't need that standard business license. Last year was kind of a transitional year. Um, Maybe you didn't make over 100 and you need to just switch your account status to uh, filing not required because you didn't make over 100. I think the next slide kind of talks about that a little bit. Yeah. So that new threshold, I wonder how long we can call that a new threshold. It was such a big change for us. It was a big deal. So if you do think you have a standard business license, or know you have a standard business license, not sure about that business tax account, if you want to reach out to us, we can switch it if you did not make 100 uh, in the last year. Okay, just talked a little bit about this business tax registration. If you obtained a standard business license from your city or county clerk, that does automatically register you for business tax. After you receive the license, you're going to get a letter from us, and you can use the information on that letter, such as the letter ID. It'll give you a business tax account number to set up access to that business tax account in TINTAP. TINTAP is our online tax filing site. It's kind of like online banking, but for your taxes. We can talk about that later. But so again, if you think you may have a business tax account because you had a standard license, but you didn't see that letter or lost that letter and you don't have access to your business tax account and you need it, reach out to us and we'll help you get the information you need to gain access to that. A question here about if you need every county, all 95 counties have business tax and business licensing. Okay, so this right here applies to all counties. All right, so if you make between 3 and 100, you'll need to go to your county clerk for sure. Over 100, county clerk for sure for that standard business license. But does your city that you're located in need a business license? Well, we have a dashboard here. Actually, I'll just go ahead and click on that. Let's go directly over to it. I can go back. This will tell you if you hover over your county. I live in Hamilton County. If you hover over that, let's bring it up a little bit more, it will tell you whether business tax and business licensing is imposed in the individual municipalities within that county. Okay, let's look at Davidson here. You can see City of Belmead does not have business tax and license. When you see there that third column that says impose business tax, that also goes for business licensing. Berry Hill doesn't have business tax and licensing. Forest Hills, no. Goodlettsville, Nashville, Ridgetop, yes. Oak Hill does not. So whatever county you're in Tennessee that you're physically located in, you just need to check and see if you need to get a city or municipal license as well. Once you are set up in our system, we allocate, when you file the return, it's a consolidated return and everything gets allocated automatically. So sorry to make you dizzy here, but I'm going to go back to where I was, wanted to show you where that was. Registering a location in TINTAP. So let's say you've already got a business and you've already got a TinTap account and you're wanting to add another location, that is something you can do directly from TinTap. But then you'll also have to visit your local clerk's office to get a license after that. One license is only for each individual location. Business tax and licensing is location based. All right, so we're going to talk here for just a minute about uh, what is like just an overview of business tax. What it is gross sales, which is all sales derived from products or services without any deductions yet. Okay, just your gross sales. If you paid out money for other taxes, whatever you paid out in salaries or overhead, all of that doesn't matter. Gross sales is what business tax is based on. Okay, just your gross sales. You're going to multiply those gross sales by a rate, and that rate is based on your business tax classification and whether you are a retailer or wholesaler. Classification is something that is set up when you get your business license or when you register directly with us. I want to caution you here to, if you've already gotten your business license from your local jurisdiction or jurisdictions, if your city or municipality requires one as well, just make sure that that's in line and make sure the class is the same on both, especially if you're filing business tax, if you've got a standard business license, because sometimes when you're first getting set up, the right hand's not talking to the left hand, and the county may set you up as one class. We have 5 different classifications, and this county may set you up as one, and the city is another. That's something that can get confused in the very beginning. So since we've got new businesses here, just make sure those 2 things line up. Retailer or wholesaler, that's something you will not know until you've had a year's worth of sales, right? It's or 50% of your sales wholesale sales, so to other retailers, or are they to the general public? So if your sales of a service, for example, would be sales to the public. You'll determine that when you go to file your business tax return. You will be the one to say, I'm filing as a retailer or a wholesaler. And there's just a slight difference in those rates. So you got gross sales times the rate, and then you can take a few deductions and credits with business tax. We're going to talk a little bit about those here in just a minute. Deductions are going to reduce the tax liability, and credits will offset that liability. There are just a handful. And then you're going to uh, get your tax due. It is due on the 15th day of the 4th month following your fiscal year end. As I just mentioned, for the most common fiscal year end is December 31st, a calendar year end, which means 15th day of the 4th month falls on April 15th. There is not an option for extending the or getting an extension for business tax, except in extreme extenuating circumstances like natural disaster, or if your business your business had a natural disaster, caught on fire or something like that happened, then you can request. But for the most part, unlike F&E tax, business tax has no option for extension. It's just due on the 15th day of the 4th month. One thing I will say about the due date of, and I think I have a slide about this here in a few minutes, but about the deadline for business tax. Your business license, for those that have a standard business license and owe business tax due on 15th day of the 4th month, that license will not expire until 30 days after that. Okay, some people look at their business license and they'll say, for example, May 15th, and they'll think, oh, I've got till May 15th to file and pay, which in essence renews that license. Well, if you were to file and pay business tax on May 14th, the day before your license expires, you're going to have some penalty and interest accrued on that late tax filing. We do have some other references here that I want to talk to you about, specifically about filing. There is a webinar that is dedicated specifically to filing the business tax return. So a lot of businesses do find that they can file the business tax return themselves. It's a pretty simple return. You're also obviously free to hire a professional to do that, but we do recommend, I'll say this again a little bit later when we talk about TinTap, even if you hire a third party to do all your tax filings, we do recommend that every business owner at least has access to their tax accounts on TinTap, just so you have a snapshot of what's going on, even if you're not the one doing the filing. So I recommend to every new business, watch this filing the business tax return webinar. I think it would be helpful to you. We also have a help video on our website that's specifically about filing the business tax return. Business tax rates are very low. When I was just mentioning how it's based on gross receipts and gross sales, you look here for the different classifications, which we'll break down here in a minute. There's a retailer rate and whole weight. We're talking very, very minimal. 0.001 for class 1, class 2, 0.0015, very low rates based on classification. So how to choose your classification. Uh, your clerk's office should help you choose what classification you are, but I think it's important that you understand what the classifications are just to make sure you are classified right. We're all human. Actual person has to, working at your clerk's office, has to be the one to choose, after you tell them what you're going to be doing, choose which category you fall into. So again, I want you to understand these and make sure that you are classified correctly. We'll start here in the blue area, class 1. And classification is going to be based on what your dominant business activity is. So what the majority of your sales are. You've got a business. If you've got a business that does a lot of these things or does them all, I always use like a big box like Home Depot. They're going to sell lumber. They're also going to sell furniture, right? A gas station is going to have prepared food and gas and maybe some other items, right? A Cracker Barrel, prepared food and clothing and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to be choosing classification based on what your dominant sales are. So keep that in mind. Class 1A is food and beer for home preparation consumption. That's a grocery store. It's not already prepared. It's for you to prepare food and beer for home consumption. And food brokerage services. 1B, lumber, building materials, tools. I'm not going to list every single one of these, but there are 5 different subtypes to class 1. Class 2 in the green here, we've got some very specific uh, tangible personal property. That's what TPP stands for. Some very specific things listed here, okay? And it's also a catch-all for if you don't see what it is your dominant sales are in listed anywhere else, okay? Going to move on to class 3 here, which is another laundry list of specific tangible things, okay? Very specific stuff here. Again, you've got, if you don't see what you sell, your dominant sales are, if you don't see it listed anywhere, you're going to be a 2, which is the catch-all for any tangible personal property not specifically listed anywhere else.
Hey, Katie, real quick.
Yes.
Just clarifying, even on your slide there, you're exactly right about the class 2 being the catch-all, and that is for tangible personal property sales. But class 3 is the catch-all for services.
Services, yes.
Yeah, so that's one thing, because you see all these words here. Well, what does my store do?
Yeah.
I'm an e-store and I do something. Oh my gosh, you're not going to probably find every single thing listed here.
Right.
So if you're not, you're probably going to end up being a 2 or a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now keep this in mind too. With business tax, Katie's telling you about the classifications because it's so important if you have to pay business tax. Now, you as a new business owner, most of you are probably going to get these minimal licenses and you're probably not going to pay business tax coming out the gate. Okay. I mean, if you make more than $100,000 your first year, that is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And you should happily pay tax. How about that? That'd be great. But most of you won't, and that's no offense to anybody. It's just the way things go, right? So that being said, the classification, while it's important, it's not super duper important because you're still going to have a license either way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Billy. As he mentioned, class 3 is also for services. There are some exempt services. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But if you are a service-based business and that's the majority of your gross income for your business, then you're going to be a class 3. Class 4 is for constructing or improving real property. So what we think of as a contractor All right. Also, installing tangible personal property or providing exterminating services, selling livestock, poultry, or farm products, or receiving commission from those sales. And they're class 4 contractors are kind of their own. They've got special rules. If you're a contractor and you are on this webinar right now, I'm going to refer you over to a special webinar we have that's because I don't think we have. Hold on a second. Yeah, we don't. Um, the special rules for contractors when it comes to business tax and how you register. I'm going to refer you over to a webinar that we have called Business Tax for Contractors. Check that out. That is a necessity if you are a contractor. Class 5 has two parts, A and B. One is industrial loan and thrift. The other is natural gas marketers. Thrift, we're not talking like a thrift store. We're talking about the loan and thrift. And you're gonna, if that applies to you, which I'm sure that it doesn't, those we're talking big companies here, they're gonna register directly with the Tennessee Department of Revenue and not go through their clerk's office. So all right, we're going to talk about those exempt services. So the sale of services are subject to business tax unless they are specifically exempt under our statute. If they're exempt, then you don't need a business license, no business taxes due. But if one of these services, one of these businesses that where the services are exempt, if they also sell tangible personal property or any other taxable service, they may be liable for needing to get a license and liable for business tax. An example here, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but an example is going to be veterinary services, the last on the list here. My vet's office, actually not my current vet, we just changed recently. The vet we were going to, they had a little store in the front of the vet's office that sold all kinds of stuff. Leashes, toys, pet food, everything. Those items are subject to business tax. Just the veterinary services are not. So if the sale of those items that are subject to business tax equals 3,000 to 100,000 annually in gross sales, they're going to need a minimal license for that. No business tax because that $100,000 threshold still applies. But if over 100,000 in sales of tangible personal property, another example is going to be like a medical or dental office. A lot of dermatologist office are going to sell lotions and creams, or a dental office may sell water pick or toothbrushes, stuff like that. Those sales are going to be subject to the same that pyramid I showed you a few minutes ago, where between 3 and 100 minimal business license, over 100 standard business license, and needing to pay business tax. And if you're wondering if your specific service may fall under one of these categories, but you're not sure, you can always call us, or if you want to do a little bit of homework, our law bases the exemption of the service on what's called the SIC group, which is the Standard Industrial Classification. It's through OSHA, and you can click on this link here for the SIC manual. It goes into more detail about the exact services that are in these what they called major group or industry groups. So, but again, that can get kind of confusing, and even clerk's offices sometimes get confused about this because I mean we didn't write the law, we just administer it, right? And this stuff can get confusing. And again, very important that you make sure you're classified right on your license, especially if you're paying tax, if you've got a standard license and paying business tax. All right, so certain industries or entities are just excluded from needing to register for and pay for business tax and business license due to the nature of what they are and what they do. Manufacturers, for example, are excluded from needing a business license and business tax. Probably my guess would be that was in an effort for our legislature to encourage manufacturers to come here, right? They're excluded. They do have to have a exemption for industrial machinery, a sales tax exemption for industrial machinery. Trucking companies offering services to the public, otherwise known as common carriers, do not need a business license and are not liable for business tax. If you operate vending machines and exercise the option of paying what we call the gross receipts tax, it's another one of our tax types. You can do the gross receipts tax instead of business tax. It's one or the other. Newspaper route carriers and peddlers are exempt. Institutions operating for religious or charitable purposes with respect to profits earned from the sale of contributed items. I'm going to go back here a couple slides. Speaking of religious or nonprofits, where is it here? Services, it's the fourth bullet here. These are exempt services. Services performed by charitable or religious organizations are exempt. But if, for example, let's say a church has a bookstore in it and those items are not donated but regular, just a regular old bookstore, those items would be subject to licensing and tax based on the gross receipts there. But this exemption here is for donated items for religious or charitable purposes. Those are not subject. 501c3 or 4s whose only taxable business activity during a tax period is at the Tennessee State Fair or at only one county fair, you're exempt. Sales of rental of real property that belongs to them, there's kind of a caveat there. Selling your house, obviously, that is exempt from business tax, but short-term rental sales are going to be subject to business tax. I should probably update this slide to say that we do have a whole webinar dedicated to short-term rentals. If you rent out a place on Airbnb or Vrbo or one of those, or just individually through yourself, there are tax implications for you, and we have a whole webinar dedicated to that as well. Radio and TV stations are exempt from business tax, as well as publishers or printers of newspapers and periodicals. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time right now for the purpose of making sure we get through everything on business tax deductions, but to let you know that they're going to be listed right here. But also we have a webinar coming up in March. So before business tax filing, if you are a new business and you're on here and you are going to be subject to business tax, good for you. You made over 100 last year. Check out that webinar the last Tuesday in March to learn more about business tax deductions. Okay. Um, When to file, I already talked about this, the 15th day of the fourth month following the fiscal year end. You can see here this little timeline. This timeline is going to assume the entity has a calendar year end of 12/31. You're going to file and pay that business tax return on the 15th day of the fourth month, which is April 15th. And that license, as I was mentioning, expires 30 days after that, after the return is late.
Hey, Katie,
Again,
before you move on from this
yeah,
slide, that thing where you've got your pointer at is super important.
right here.
A lot of people think, well, I filed an extension.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
there is not an extension for business tax. It's not in the law. Not that we don't want it to be necessarily. It's just that the legislature hasn't provided for that.
Hmm.
So when April 15th for most of you comes by and you don't file and pay on time and you're obligated to do business tax, you're going to have to pay extra. So don't pay us extra.
No.
Pay attention. Remember that expiration date on that license, like it says there in red, is a month after. So you got to pay it by your IRS due date, which is
Mhm.
typically April 15th, right? So there you go. I just want to point that out because we get that question every single year, all the time.
Absolutely. And again, if there's natural disasters, there can be an extension, but we put out important notices about that kind of thing. So I think there may be an option for an extension for some for Helene victims that businesses that were affected by Helene. All right, we're also not going to spend a lot of time right now on filing the business tax return because, as I told you earlier, there's a whole webinar dedicated to filing the business tax return and how to do that. So um, I'm going to real quickly, I have another slide about this later, but it's very important when it is time to close your business, or sometimes even you're just closing a certain location and opening it somewhere else. You do need to file a final return for a location and reach out to us and let us know within 15 days. Okay, I am going to go back over to the slides here, and I'm going to open up the chat, and we're going to be taking questions now just about business tax. All right, you can put your questions in right now. I'm also going to go ahead and show you while you're putting your questions in the chat where the business tax manual is. I'm going to go back over to our website. Let's see here. Let's go to the top, tn.gov/revenue. I go to our tax webinars every single day, all day long. Everyone who works for Department of Revenue does. They used to be called tax manuals. Wait, tax guides. Sorry, tax guides. And they were just like a repeat of what the law said. We have made them so awesome. They're very robust, lots of information. You can get to the tax manuals either by clicking on tax resources and tax guidance right here, but I'm going to use the tile. Scroll down a little bit and go to tax resources and then click on tax guidance. All right, so our tax manuals are all going to be here. We've got just show you the different types of manuals that we have. Alcohol business for this is the agricultural manual, F&E, hall income, that's gone away now. But industry specific guidance, I'm going to click on that. You can see we've got one for auctioneers. Ooh, that is brand new. I haven't even looked at this one yet. Just came out, the auctioneers and consignees manual. I'm excited about that. We'll probably have a webinar about that coming up in the near future. Short-term rental units, I was just telling you all about how we have a webinar about that. We have a manual there, a manual for auto dealers, a manual for contractors. I was telling you we have a webinar for them too, and a manual for nonprofit organizations. We're going to click on the business tax manual. You can see here, this is going to be our current manual. You can look for prior manuals here, especially if you were filing a return for an older period, that might come in handy. But let's look at the current tax manual just to show you how it's set up. You may already know about this, but when you are in any website or PDF on a website, you can click Control F and type in a term like, I'm going to type in the word gross here. So it takes you straight to 128 places in this whole manual where the term, where that term is. And you can scroll through to see the different areas where it is, but it takes you right to that keyword that you're searching for. But these manuals are all set up the same. There's a table of contents in the beginning where you can go directly to the chapter or subchapter that's in the table of contents. But for business tax, if you are a business that is liable for business tax, I would recommend just poking through this manual somewhat. It's 180 pages. I wouldn't expect you to read all 180. It doesn't even all apply to every business. Sometimes there's some industry specific stuff in here, but I would at least become familiar with the manual. I'm just going to briefly scroll through here. Who is subject to business tax, registering and licensing, determining gross sales. That might be something that is helpful to you. The different classifications, filing requirements, sourcing and distribution, exemptions and exclusions. Just a couple more here. Deductions, credits, and then finally industry specific guidance. So great manual there. So I'm going to go, actually, I'll probably, yeah, I need to go back over to the slides. Billy, if you, have you seen any questions come up specifically about business tax that would be good to
Yeah, lots of them.
address?
We've
Okay.
had lots of them, and put some answers out in chat that I think will help some folks. Um, Mallory asked a really interesting question. Are business licenses still required for exempt service businesses? The answer is no. That's a fair question though, because you would think, well, maybe I need some kind of piece of paper that shows that I'm exempt. So no, like a manufacturer, you're just exempt. You don't have to have a piece of paper, a license, or anything like that that shows that you're exempt. Very, very good question. I thought that was pretty well thought out.
Mm,
Um, Non-tax food items, I think you might be talking about sales tax. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's generally subject to business tax. That's tangible
mhm.
personal property.
That's why we're
Uh,
stopping in between each tax type because it's easy to get confused about them.
right,
What's
right.
taxable, what's not. Most things with business tax that you sell are going to be taxable. except for
Yeah,
some
and
services.
a lot of times when folks send us emails in, and in particular to my group, and we try to address your question, sometimes people are not specific about what kind of tax you're talking about, because the answer can be a whole lot different, but
Hmm.
depending on what you're actually asking about. Okay. Um, I do want to address this one from Amy. Did you say accounting firms are exempt from business tax? I was told by a county clerk that firm would have to register for it. No, that is, they are not. Now, here's the difference. And this in the business tax manual that Katie has right up there on the screen. It talks about the fact that CPAs and accounting firms are exempt from business tax and business licensing, but tax preparation firms are not. Okay. So if you have particular tax prep business out there that's doing someone's 1040 federal returns every year, but they're not providing full accounting services, those tax prep places are subject to business tax and business licensing. Okay. So I think you got bad information there, Miss Amy. So if y'all need any help on that, let us know and we'll be glad to help you.
I
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
address a question here from Kay about understand no tax is due if gross receipts are under 100. We provide services in a neighboring county. We have an additional 100K threshold before we owe. Do we have an additional 100K threshold before we owe business tax? Okay, so this is something I want to address. If your gross sales, it doesn't matter if they're in your county or in another county, except for if you're a contractor. Okay, again, I said there's whole different rules for contractors. But if you're a Tennessee business, where your money, where your services are uh, taking place, or if you're selling to another county in Tennessee, uh, it doesn't matter. That threshold is based on your gross receipts. Now, I will say there is a deduction for sales made in interstate commerce. That we didn't get into deductions,
Right.
but if you're a Tennessee-based business and you've got sales where it's being delivered out of state, there's a deduction there, but those sales still get included in
Mhm.
determining gross sales. Okay.
Andy
Um,
had that same question
okay.
too. Yeah.
It's different for
Uh,
contractors, but for
yes.
all other businesses, gross sales are gross sales. Doesn't matter where they're done. There may be a deduction for you depending on where the sale is, where the service is performed, or where the item is delivered to, but it's all included in gross sales.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that Tim was alluding to in his. We were talking about the location and closing locations and having the right location down. Tim mentioned that a location for this particular business has always been an accountant's office. Okay, guys, listen, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me tell you why it's wrong. That's not where your business is located. Your business is located where you're located. Okay, it's where your books and records are kept for your business. I promise you, it's not your accountant's office. Okay.
That
If
could
you
be your
have
mailing
an,
address.
yeah, that's fine, as far as that goes. But your location address is typically going to be either where you have a brick and mortar location, okay, that you're actually getting gross receipts at, or at the very least, your home address. Okay. It is not a post office box. It is not a box at a UPS store. It's not really even your registered agent, which you guys were talking about earlier, right? It really needs to be where you're located. So if you've got that mixed up or messed up somehow, let us know. We'll help you fix it, or you can fix it yourself on 10 Tap if you can figure that out. But don't be surprised if it gets a little too confusing. Just reach out to us and say, oh, I need to fix this. Okay, well, here's what we need to do. And of course, moving during your filing period is tricky too. So for business tax, let's make believe you move from Main Street to Spring Street. Okay. If that's the case, and let's say it's March of this year, well, you're going to have part of a year that's going to be at the old location and part in the new. So you'll actually have to have two locations for that period, but that old location will need to be closed down as of the end of when you actually file it. Okay. If that makes any sense at all. It's a lot of words, For us that do this all day long, it's like we're like robots. We kind of know it, but you're not, and don't feel bad if for whatever reason, you're not quite getting that. Just reach out to us and we'll help you.
Amy has a question here about defining short-term rental for purposes of business tax. I want to say this is kind of a confusing topic, okay? Here's why it's confusing. Our law has defines short-term rental differently for business tax, sales tax, and occupancy tax. So for business tax,
Of
it's
course.
basically short-term rental is considered less than 6 months.
Right. So think about this. If you own a rental property like a cabin in Gatlinburg or something like that, and you're renting that out by the night or by the week or by the month or whatever, you are just like a hotel. Okay. So you're going to be subject to business tax and business licensing on your gross receipts, right? So you're no different than them. But if you're an apartment complex and you're doing long-term leases with people for like a year or something like that, that's a different story. Okay, and that's where you're not subject to business tax. Now, property management companies are subject to business tax
Mm.
on their management fees. Okay, but they are not. If you own property yourself, renting it long term, no, that's not business taxable or business license.
Here's our we had this webinar. This is just the PDF from the webinar about short-term rentals, just to show you, because I know that this applies to a lot of people. Um, make this a little smaller here. So this is where it's different for the definition is different for sales tax, local occupancy tax, and business tax. You look here, the number of continuous days that the rental is exempt from. Basically, how many days it defines short-term rental. For sales tax, it's 90. For local occupancy, it's 30, and for business tax, it's 180.
While while you're wrapping that up there, Katie, thank you for pointing that out. Jonathan asked if they can order hard copies of this manual. No, you cannot.
No, we
Isn't that
change it too
bad?
much.
We're bad people. No, we're not. But we do change them, and they're updated at
Yeah.
least once or twice a year. So we're not going to have that in hard copy. My suggestion to y'all and is to do what we do. A lot of us will have a copy of the most current manual. We'll just download it to our computer, put it on a little icon and click on it when we need it. Now,
Mhm.
do you need to do that necessarily? Maybe not in your business, but in our business, it's super helpful to have these tools right at our fingertips. But we don't even print them out either. It's a
Mm-mm.
lot easier. And Katie will tell you too. Katie, click on the business tax manual right there and show them how to search real quick. Do it put in like
Control F.
control F, type in like
Control F.
contractor or something.
Contractor. We got 152 instances of contractor, and
Yeah, and then you can just go through those and go right to sort of the area that you might
yeah.
want. Contractors being sort of a nebulous term in there, but you know, it's a great way for us to save time and when we help you with your questions as
Mhm.
well. I'm trying to think of anything else we need to do. We're not going to be able to touch on everything like Katie is saying here too.
We'll take a break here right at 11. So for a couple minutes, we'll see if there are any others, because
Yeah,
we're about to
let,
switch gears, y'all, and switch over to sales tax. You have to wipe everything about business tax out of your mind, but when we come back
yeah.
from break.
Leonard asked a question. He says, got a business registered with the Secretary of State in June and the business license issued in November. When does the business calendar year begin? Essentially, just whenever you started your business, which would probably be June. So, really, when you're talking about taxes, though, when you're talking about reporting your taxes, you're reporting for the entire period. Now, most of you are on a December year end, which would make perfect sense. You know, your year end is exactly what your IRS's year end is. Okay, so anything from the start of your business, Leonard, all the way through the end of December of 2024, in your example, would be reportable, and that's pretty. It's pretty much that easy.
Okay, I've got to address this. Carly, I've got Carly confused. Carly says, I'm confused
What
now.
did you do to Carly?
I only need a standard business tax license for jurisdictions I have over 100 in, correct? Okay, here's here's the deal. Only class 4 contractors need to worry about where their work is being done. Your threshold, again, unless you're a contractor, your threshold is going to be based on your gross receipts. Doesn't matter what jurisdictions those are in. If I'm a interior designer, for example, I live in Hamilton County. If I have a couple jobs over in Bradley County, I'm making money over there. I've got, some clients in Marion County, some clients in Sequatchie County. My business is based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Hamilton County. So that is where my business license is from. And that
Mhm.
is where all my gross receipts, my line one, and in determining whether you meet the threshold, gross receipts are all my gross receipts. Again, like I said, there are some deductions for stuff going on out of state, but unless you're a class 4 contractor, if you're a class 4 contractor, so if you're constructing real property or making improvements to real property or installing tangible property, different rules there. And I'm not going to confuse things in this webinar with that. I'm going to refer you over to a whole nother webinar we have that's specifically for those class 4 contractors. But unless you're a class 4 contractor, anything else you sell or any other service you provide, those gross receipts are just based on your company's gross receipts. Doesn't matter where they're happening. Okay, I think we need to take a little break here because we're halfway through our workshop. And I think maybe, what do you think, Billy? 5 minutes and then come back and we'll switch gears to sales tax?
Let's make it 10. Let's come back at
Okay.
10:10 Central Time.
Okay.
And for those of you that had questions about business tax that we haven't answered yet, we may be able to circle back later, but if we don't, we're going to tell you how to ask your questions
Yeah.
so that you get specific answers. Okay.
I
So
think we
you,
may have time at the end for some more
yeah, we'll
questions.
see about that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. We'll
Okay.
see y'all in 10 minutes.
Thanks, guys. See you in 10
Okay.
minutes. So we're back, aren't we?
I was just wondering if you were back. Yes, here we are.
If you're not here,
Nope.
raise your hand. All
um,
right.
all
I'll
right.
let you go on. Hey, Katie, enjoy
Yeah.
sales tax. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
We're switching gears, y'all.
All
Get
right.
everything we just talked about out of your mind for just a minute, because when it comes to thresholds and what's taxable, what's not, this is a whole different ballgame. So, switching gears, going to talk about sales tax now. When we get to the end of sales tax, we will chat again about. You can put your questions in chat when we get to the end of this little section. So, just like with business tax, we are going to go over to the sales tax basics PDF. Okay, so I'm going to go over to our website. Back to the top, tn.gov/revenue. Y'all are going to get a test at the end of this to see how quickly you can get to all these places on our website that I'm showing you a million times. Just kidding. Okay, so we're on tn.gov/revenue. Scrolling down to taxpayer education and outreach, that's where the webinar video library is. And then clicking on tax webinars. And then at the bottom is the webinar video library. I'm going to type in the word basic again because that's where sales tax basics is too. Okay, sales tax basics. Just so you know, we do have a Spanish version of this webinar as well. All right, clicking on that one. Okay, we had this one in May of 2024. Who and what is subject to sales tax? What are the rates? What are the exemptions? And then some more resources. All right. This is interesting, y'all. So the breakdown of state revenue, we have a new one of these since this was out because we have our new annual report out, but it's probably similar to this. As you can see, this is all the different taxes that come in. Sales tax is the biggie, about 60, I think it's like 60 something percent of tax revenue in Tennessee comes from sales tax. Big chunk is from franchise and excise. Where is business tax in here? So small. All right. So sales tax is the biggie. All right. Make it to where you can see this whole thing here. All right. So the basics of sales tax, this is very basic right here, but it applies to dealers engaged in the business of making sales of taxable products and services. Those dealers or the retailers are responsible for collecting it from the consumers. All right. If you don't collect it from your consumer, you still have to pay it. There's a little shop up here in my neighborhood that periodically they say no sales tax this weekend. Well, it's not that they're not still having to remit it. I won't have to pay. They're not making me pay it when I go buy something from there, but they're having to cover it. Somebody has to cover it. Okay. So what's subject to sales tax? Basically, sales of tangible personal property are taxable unless specifically exempted by law. Tangible personal property is you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. I saw a question, sorry to go back to business tax, but during break I saw a question on there about what about digital commerce, e-commerce, digital products. Those are considered tangible personal property. Sales of services are generally not taxable for sales tax purposes unless our statute specifically says that they are subject that service is subject to sales tax, or if the service is part of the sales price of the tangible personal property, then that's lumped together and it's subject to sales tax. So sales tax is a state rate plus a local rate, and that equals the total tax that's going to get paid. And there are some special rates. Use tax is kind of a companion tax to sales tax. We just had a webinar about that last month. So we're not going to talk a lot about that, except for a little bit later when we talk about the resale certificate. But so who needs to register for sales tax? Let me get up just a little bit here. Does the business have a physical presence in Tennessee? First off, if the answer to that is yes, if the in-state tangible personal property sales threshold of 4,800 annually is met, then you are required to collect and remit Tennessee sales tax. If in-state services threshold of 1,200 annually is met, then you are required to collect and remit sales tax. if those tangible personal property or services thresholds are not met, then you do not need to collect sales tax and you do not need to remit it to the Department of Revenue. Okay, if you do not have a physical presence in Tennessee, so for those out-of-state businesses that may be on here with us today, if the economic sales threshold, economic nexus threshold of 100,000, now that has changed not too long ago, just a handful of years ago. So economic sales nexus is 100,000 within a 12-month period of sales attributed to Tennessee customers. If that is met, then the out-of-state business must register and file Tennessee sales tax. Or if substantial nexus is met, if not, then you do not, if you're an out-of-state business, then you do not have to collect sales tax from Tennessee customers. I'm going to refer you again to actually, this is a new webinar that I'm referring you to, not the Nexus one. We do have a webinar that I talked about earlier about Nexus for out-of-state businesses. This one is for reporting out-of-state sales by delivery destination. That is for out-of-state businesses. That's not for in-state businesses that are selling to out-of-state. We're not talking about that. We're talking about out-of-state businesses that are making sales. How do they source that? So for sales tax, similar to business tax, you're going to register for each location that you have. Unless you're an out-of-state business, then you just have one registration for all of your Tennessee sales. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between tangible personal property and real property here. Tangible personal property is defined as personal property that can be seen, weighed, measured, felt, or touched, or that is in any way, in any other manner, any other manner perceptible to the senses. Real property is immovable. That's the key word with tangible versus real there, is immovable, such as land, buildings, improvement, and even some firmly attached or integrated structures. Our sales tax manual, similar to our business tax manual, has a really great breakdown of comparing real versus tangible. Usually you can tell what's what, but sometimes there's some confusing stuff like, what about an in-ground pool? I mean, sorry, an above ground pool, things like that. So there's some questions, mainly regarding like household type items, if it can be removed or not, or if it was custom to the area, custom drapery versus drapery you just bought. I'm going to refer you to our manual for more details on if it's considered tangible personal property or real property. All right, we're going to talk about what services are taxable. We do have a webinar dedicated to services that are subject to sales tax, but here's a listing right here: repair or installation of tangible personal property, and that includes repair or installation of computer software. We do have a webinar about taxation of computer software. I think if we had $1 for every time I said we have a webinar for that, we could get rich, right? Lodging services and rooms is subject to sales tax. Short-term space rental for making sales, like booth rental, that is subject to sales tax, that service. Cleaning of TPP, and that includes animal bathing. We don't like to think of our pets as being tangible personal property, but the law says they are. Parking and storage of motor vehicles is considered a taxable service. Telecommunication services, ancillary telecommunication services, and enriching of uranium materials. I doubt we have anybody here today that is going to be in that service.
I do that on my spare time when I
Sure.
don't work for the government. So
Enrich uranium. Okay. I don't even know what that means, but we're going to talk a little bit more because this is the service that I think is sometimes people can be confused about. It's a little ambiguous, and that's the repair of TPP, the first item on this list of taxable services. We're going to break that down a little bit here. What is considered repair of tangible personal property? Work done to preserve or restore the TPP, mending or correcting TPP, altering or alterations, refinishing, cleaning that is necessary part of any repair work. Service calls where any repair work is done or contemplated, or changes in the size, shape, or content. So I do repair work on refrigerators or appliances. That's a service that is subject to sales tax. I alter clothes. Clothes are tangible personal property. That's altering clothes. That's a service subject to sales tax. So hopefully that helps you understand that a little bit more. But again, almost all TPP is subject to sales tax, and some services, mainly repair of TPP. All right, we're going to talk about rates here for a minute. The general state sales tax rate in Tennessee is 7%. It's one of the higher ones in the whole country, but luckily here in Tennessee, we don't have an income tax. And as you saw in one of those earlier slides, a big chunk of our revenue in this state comes from sales tax. So it's a pretty high rate, 7%. Any county or incorporated city can levy a local sales tax. That is going to be 2.75 or less. There is a link here to the local rates. So I just remembered before we went to break, I'm not even going to talk about it right now. Sorry, I'm going to derail myself. Okay, let's stay on track. The sales tax rate on food is 4%. That's the state sales tax rate on food. I should verify, qualify that. This is a really good notice that's about an old sales tax holiday that we had. It's no longer a sales tax holiday for food and food ingredients, but it's my favorite one-stop shop for telling you what qualifies as food or food ingredients. It's not prepared food. It's going to be mainly the food you see like in a grocery store on the shelves. Although some grocery stores do sell prepared food, that is subject to the full state rate. Food and food ingredients, that's just a really good, this link right here, this notice gives a good list on that. There is a law that passed last year stating that certain cities and towns can adopt a reduced sales tax rate on food and food ingredients. So far, I think we've had one municipality that has adopted that. But if you have point of sale software and sell food, it should be, I think that kind of helps you plug that in. Specified digital products, these are audio visual products, things like that, are taxed at the state rate of 7%, but then there's a standard local rate of 2.5. It's not going to be different depending on the local jurisdiction. We do have a special webinar dedicated just to sales tax on specified digital products. Going back up here to this blue box you see here, in-state sellers collect and remit local tax at the rate where the business is located. You don't have to worry about if you're based in Davidson County and you're selling something and you're shipping it to Knox County or any other county in Tennessee, you just charge where you're the sales tax rate of where you're based. Okay, sellers that don't have a location in Tennessee, so out-of-state businesses, are going to collect it on the rate of the local rate of where the item is delivered. And the webinar I referred to a few slides ago, delivery sales tax based on delivery destination for out-of-state sales, that's where you need to go for more information about how to do that if we've got any out-of-state businesses on here today. Okay, there's something really weird and confusing here in Tennessee that I don't think, we've done some research, it's been a while, but I don't even think any other states have this. It's called single article tax. We do have a webinar dedicated to it. But if you sell basically high dollar items, anything that costs over $1,600 for that item, then you might want to perk up here. If you don't, this is kind of confusing. You may want to block me out for just a minute because I single article is just weird. So it's considered any item of tangible personal property that is commonly understood to be a separate unit capable of being sold separately. So you see here the example I've got, like jewelry, furniture, pre-written computer software is considered subject to single article, a car. So high dollar items, I mean, a purse, a pair of shoes, anything that's over $1,600 in price, there's a special way to tax it. All right. The entire item is subject to the state 7%. That part's easy. But then is where we break things down a little bit. The first 1,600 is going to be only the first 1,600 is subject to that local rate. And then the amount between 1,600 and 3,200, so if it's really expensive, that whole next $1,600 chunk is going to be subject to a flat 2.5 state single article rate. Okay. There is a small little exception to that $1,600 threshold for local. Hamlin County and Hancock County The limitations are a little bit lower there. For Hamlin, it's 300. For Hancock County, it's 375. So basically the entire thing subject to 7%. The first 1,600 subject to that local rate. The next 1,600 subject to a flat 2.75 rate. And the webinar about that. So if you do sell high dollar items, I'm going to say it's a necessity that you watch that webinar and see more information about single article. All right, what is considered the sales price? And that's what you're gonna base the sales tax on, is the sales price. It's the amount subject to tax. It's the total amount for which taxable products or services are sold. It includes the seller's costs, expenses, and charges, such as the cost of the property sold, materials used, labor and services, incoming freight, any kind of taxes imposed on the seller, services necessary to complete the sale, delivery charges, installation charges. A question comes in sometimes about what if I'm selling something and I didn't use my resale certificate for it, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but and I had to pay tax on it, but I'm selling it. Well, just mark your product up. That's considered a tax that was imposed on you. You can include that on in your sales price. So we're going to talk now about some exemptions for sales tax. There are some usage-based examples that include pollution control, that you have to have a valid pollution control exemption certificate. We do have a webinar on that. Certain products are just exempt from sales tax based on what they are, like textbooks, school meals, certain healthcare items, more in our manual about which specific items. There are not a whole lot of items of TPP that are exempt from sales tax just based on what they are. Not a whole lot of those. So. And then the big one is going to be entity-based. It's who the entity is does not have to pay sales tax, like government, not all government, but U.S. government, state of Tennessee government, and Tennessee counties and municipalities won't have to pay sales tax. They have to present an exemption certificate, and they have to pay for the item or service using the government's a government payment, government issued payment. So if I work for the state of Tennessee, if I go stay at a hotel, I'm going to pay tax on that unless I'm using a state of Tennessee credit card, which I don't have. When I travel for work, I use my own card and get reimbursed for it. So I pay tax because I'm paying using Katie Julian's payment. So for all of these entity-based exemptions, the payment has to be made by the exempt entity. Now I'm telling you all about these exemptions, and some of you may be exempt, right? It's kind of rare, so maybe not, but the main thing is if you sell something, you may be presented with these exemption certificates, and I want you to understand what you're looking at. Nonprofits can purchase items without paying sales tax. They have to have a Tennessee nonprofit exemption, or they can provide you with their 501c3 document. And again, the payment has to be made in the name of the nonprofit. Same with qualified farmers. There's an ag exemption. There's an exemption certificate for that, and the payment has to be made in the name of the exemption holder. Same with manufacturers. All exemptions are going to be reported on Schedule A of the sales tax return. Schedule G is going to have what we call temporary exemptions. Every year, at least up to this point, as long as I've been here, our legislature does give temporary sales tax exemptions. Maybe it's one weekend right before school starts. Maybe it's sales tax exemption on food for a whole month, something like that. Those temporary ones that are going to have a start and an end time are going to be on Schedule G, which is kind of an offshoot of Schedule A. All right, now we're going to talk about the resale certificate because it is an exemption from having to pay sales tax. Once you get a sales tax account, you will be issued what's called a certificate of resale. It's going to be issued by location. Each location needs its own certificate. They don't expire, but they're no longer valid when that location closes. And what you can use it for is only items intended for resale. If you have a sales tax account, you're in business and you go to Costco to buy a bunch of stuff that you're going to be reselling, or some items that you're going to be baking and you're going to be using it to resell, but then you're also buying some items to clean your office with or clean your shop with. You want to make those two separate purchases, because the first one, for items that you're going to be reselling or use towards reselling, you can use your resale certificate for that. But items that you're going to be using, like cleaning products, or let's say display cases for your business, you cannot use your resale certificate for that. So you will be, when you are selling things to other people and they give you a resale certificate, um, or any of the certificates that we just talked about, any of the exemption certificates, any of these, you need to hold on to those exemption certificates and certificates of resale. You need to hold on to them, retain them in case you get audited. Very important that you keep a copy. If you're going to be using a resale certificate or selling items, or that where you think you might be receiving resale certificates, I highly recommend watching that webinar on resale certificates. Filing for sales tax. So when you first start a sales tax account, and I'm going to talk about opening up your sales tax account before I talk about filing, actually. I'm going to take a little tangent here. When you're first setting up your business and you're going to be selling items, or you're going to be, especially if you're going to be selling items, you may open up your sales tax account a few months before you're actually going to start selling anything, right? Because you want to stock the shelves. Just so you know, when you register for that sales tax account, that is when the filing requirement begins, and all sales tax accounts are automatically set up for monthly filing. Now you can reach out to us if certain thresholds aren't met. If you're not selling a whole lot, you can opt to file quarterly or annually. We're not going to get into that today. There's more information in our manual about it, but you're automatically set up to file annually. And when I worked in our collections division a few years ago, I saw so many people wind up in collections because they were just starting their business. They needed that resale certificate, but they didn't realize that they needed to go in and file returns even though they weren't making sales yet. We don't know if you're making sales. We don't know until we know. So even if you have no sales, if you have a sales tax account, you are required to file even just a zero return. It takes 30 seconds. You just open it up in TinTap. The first question says, do you have any sales to report? You say no, and then move along. I saw so many new businesses start off falling into collections because they didn't realize that even though they weren't making sales, they still needed to go in there and file zero. Just like business tax, there is no option for a filing extension. They're set up monthly, due on the 20th day of the month following the period. So your sales that you make in January, that return is due on February 20th. If you are set up as an annual filer, if you change to being set up as an annual filer, then and your period is January 1 to December 31, then your annual sales tax return would be due on January 20th. So we've got that coming up. Quarterly, same, due on the 20th day following the quarter. Again, you're going to be set up as a monthly, though, as if you right when you first get set up. Well, the requirements, the thresholds for being able to file for quarterly or annually, we need more data on that. We need to know after a certain amount of time where you've been filing. If you don't meet the requirements, or if you do, then you can switch over. To file. So these are just a few resources about filing. We have a web page dedicated to electronic filing using Software Vendor. That's very common for most shops and even e-commerce. You're using a software vendor to make your sales, so there's information there. There's a whole webinar devoted to completing the sales tax return, also a revenue help video, filing a sales tax return, and information about filing the return in the sales tax manual. Bunch of webinars that I just want to call to your attention here that might help. If you do special events, like you do festivals and stuff like that, we do have a webinar dedicated to special events. We have had this now, this marketplace facilitators and sellers, that we had that webinar back in November, so now there actually is a webinar out there on marketplace facilitators and sellers. Now, that focuses mainly on online marketplaces and sellers. So if you are a seller and you sell through a platform like Amazon or eBay or one of those, check that webinar out. If you have your own website and make e-commerce sales, we do have a webinar about that. In the future, we plan on having one for amusements, but we don't have that yet. Sales tax for contractors, that's a good one. If you're a contractor, watch this one as well as the business tax for contractors. There's a new tax that it's its own tax. It's a hemp tax, but it's on, you report sales of hemp-derived cannabinoids on the sales tax return. Fairly new thing that just passed in our legislature a couple years ago. Those are that tax is in addition to sales tax. Same with tobacco tax, same with alcohol taxes. Those are all items that have sales tax plus the hemp tax, plus tobacco, plus alcohol. We did already have the alcohol taxes webinar that was in last August, or I think, but like I said, later this month, we're going to have specifically a liquor by the drink tax. Okay, so those are the basics on sales tax. I'm going to go back over here and open up the chat for you to put your questions about sales tax in the chat. All right, chat's open.
Yeah, so can you repeat all them? Because,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, like Katie mentioned earlier in the presentation on this, sales tax is our bread and butter. It is definitely something that we pay a lot of attention to. So you do want to get that right. We do want to make sure that we answer a lot of your questions, but a lot of these that you're going to be asking here are going to be super specific to your situation. So it may prove to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. Somebody just asked for the sales tax for contractors webinar. I'm posting it in the chat right now.
Okay. I'll talk about a general question too about locations. So we do want to have every permanent location registered where you have your sales emanating from. This goes for business tax too, for business licensing, right? So the reason for that is because local governments, they, as Katie pointed out early in her presentation, they tax the first part of sales, you know, the first dollar all the way up to generally 1,600, sometimes a little bit less, right? So the rates are a little bit different, but all these local governments, they depend on this money. So getting that right is really important. So wherever wherever you're permanently registered is where your money is going to ultimately end up going back to, at least the local tax part of it. Okay. So that's important. And we want to get that right. We want to make sure your communities are protected and that your tax money is being directed back at the things that are in your community, your schools, your roads, things of that nature. Okay. So that's super important.
Someone just asked about the exemption. Is there an exemption for schools? I'm going to take you over real quick to the sales tax manual. Get that out of my way. Starting on page, I'm in the sales tax manual. Sorry to be exemptions have a whole chapter dedicated to them, but entity-based exemptions starts on page 246 in our current sales tax manual. And I'm going to scroll on down here. But if you sell anything, I'm going to recommend you check out this chapter because you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. If you're going to exempt it out on your return, and if you ever get audited, you want to make sure you're exempt, you're doing it right, right? Where was that? Warehouse distribution, research and development. I think it's the next one. Nonprofit, charitable organizations, and schools. Sales and donations of tangible personal property, computer software, specified digital products, or taxable services are exempt from sales tax when sold or donated to the organizations listed in our law, and they're listed right here: churches, schools, hospitals, community health organizations. The exemption applies only to sales and donations made directly to the tax exempt organization, and they have to they cannot claim this exemption until they've been issued a certificate of exemption by us. I'm going to take you over one more place real quick just to show you where you can verify if an exemption certificate is legit. We get pictures sometimes or scans of people sending us saying, is this a legit exemption? And a lot of times
Right.
it's not. So I'm going to TINTAP. So just to go back real quick, I clicked on the TINTAP tile on our main TN.gov homepage. And then, oops, I already went there. If you go down to information and inquiries, we're going to spend some time on TINTAP here in a little while, but this is separate. And then
Look up
sales
under
and
other.
use tax certificate lookup under other right here. This is where you'll type in what you're seeing on the certificate, what type it is, and then you'll see an exemption number on there. Click submit, and if you have a question about it, go in here and look before you make a sale to something not legit, 'cause then you're going to be on the hook for needing to pay that sales tax if they're not truly exempt.
Mm-hmm. Now, one exception to that, guys, is governmental sales, because governments like cities, counties, in the state of Tennessee, and the federal government, they're exempt for sales tax, but we don't have them registered in our computer. They give you a generic certificate that's available on our website, and as long as they're paying with government funds, they're exempt. Okay, that question comes up all the time. All right.
I'm just going to reiterate too what I said about accepting exemption certificates. I just showed you how you can look to see if it's legit, but you want to save copies of those. If you're going to be exempting it out on your Schedule A, you want to have a copy of who submitted, who gave you those certificates.
Mm-hmm.
Records is key because in case you get audited, you don't want to be on the hook for any of that.
One question that came up, Katie, I saw in a second ago, was about farmers. People that produce agricultural products or nursery products, or that are timber harvesters, can get an exemption, right? So I think this person was asking about building supplies. So this happened a year or two ago, a change in the law. Building supplies purchased by that farmer, nursery person, timber harvester, and the supplies used in their operation, directly in their operation, yes, that person could buy them using their farmer's exemption card or certificate, and that would be legitimate. However, a contractor can't do that. Okay. That person can't just say, well, here's my card, you go get the materials. No, a contractor is going to pay sales tax. Okay. So, we not to get too lost in the weeds on this, because we could spend, and we have spent a whole webinar on this, but contractors are users and consumers of the things that they use in performance of their contract. What does that mean? That means they pay sales tax, okay, or use tax if they're bringing it in from like outside Tennessee or something. So that's it. So that contractor is going to pay tax. They're not going to charge you as the customer any sales tax, but they're going to obviously inflate their contract so that they don't get caught having to eat a lot of money. But that's how that works too. So going back to the farmer with the building question, be real careful about that, because you want to make sure that you, as the farmer, nursery person, nursery operator, or timber harvester, are the user of those materials. If you are, you're fine. It has to be for your operation. So getting a new roof put on your personal residence, no, not a thing. Don't go buying stuff for that. That you'll get in trouble. Okay. So just be real careful on that.
Billy, real quick, I'm going to show them. I'm in our webinar video library. Just to go back from our homepage, tn.gov/revenue, taxpayer education, tax webinars. I'm just going to show you how many webinars we have dedicated to sales tax topics. So
It's a lot.
I'm showing all 65 now, and I'm going to sort this column by tax type and go on down here. starting with sales tax right here. The agricultural sales tax exemption that Billy was just talking about, certified green energy, completing the sales tax return, consumer use tax, the government exemption, industrial machinery exemption, marketplace facility. I mean, look, we have a ton of sales tax webinars. Sales tax issues for contractors, what Billy was just talking about sales
Yep.
tax. Contractors can't use their resale certificate because they're considered the end users. More information about that there. Like I told y'all when we first started this, this could all be a week long or longer training, but we're just going through the basics here and we're showing you the resources of where you can find more information that may be relevant to you.
Let me answer a question that Bree had. She said if a contractor pays tax on the materials, do they need to pay tax on the labor that they charged? No, no, no. Do not, Mr. or Mrs. Contractor, charge customer sales tax. Don't do it. It's
Unless you're
not a thing.
unless you're installing tangible person or doing a service repair to tangible personal property.
Thank you.
Those are considered
Thank you.
like,
That's
I'm going to
exactly
go
right.
back to that. I'm in the sales tax basics webinar here and going back to services, scrolling, repair or installation of TPP. Some people that are class 4 contractors with business tax, I don't mean to mix them up here, but just some people considered a contractor are just doing work on
Yeah,
tangible
right.
personal property, service calls,
Exactly.
repair work. So to tangible
Right.
personal property, not a
A
repair work
contractor is
to
building or
mhm,
substantially adding things to real
real
property,
property.
not
Yeah.
tangible personal property.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple of questions about gross, reporting gross amounts on the sales tax return.
Mhm.
Yes, you want to put the gross amounts on like line 1 and some of the other lines that are up there for use tax at the beginning. You definitely don't want to double report them. So if you're reporting it on one line, don't report it on the other. The reason for that is math, because mathematically it will work its way through the schedules there, but just make sure you don't double report it.
We
Um,
have I'm looking for the what's it called? The webinar on filing the sales tax return. I know we have one.
yeah, we do.
I just don't see it here.
Yeah,
Completing. I was looking for F.
completing. Yeah,
Completing the
there you
sales
go.
tax return. That'll give you more information
Mhm.
about like what Billy was just talking about, how to determine what to put on line 1, how to break all that down. That's a good webinar right there, completing the sales tax return. All right. We've got a little over 30 minutes left, so I think we need to stop for now. Hopefully we'll have some time. Um, not stop everything, but we're going to move along. I'm going to
And
close the
hopefully,
chat.
yeah, hopefully we can come back and revisit some of this stuff
Yeah.
here in a little bit. But again, if we don't touch on your particular issue, we're going to make sure that you have the email address and the phone
Yeah.
number so that you can reach out to us and you'll get your answer. I promise. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move along here to the other taxes. We're just going to spend a minute on franchise and excise tax. And then I'm going to take you over to the F&E Basics webinar. We're not going to spend nearly as much time on it as the other two, but I just want you to know about it and go watch it later. If you're an LLC or corporation, you're really going to want to check out this F&E Basics webinar. Let's see here, franchise and excise. Let's just go to the top and type it into the search under basic, BASIC. Franchise and excise basics. So we're going to go to that PDF. This is a very recent webinar we just had a couple months ago. And I'm going to scroll through a lot of it because we really are, we've kind of limit on time here, but franchise and excise tax is a combination of two taxes. The franchise tax, now this recently changed, a big tax law change in F&E tax last year. Currently, franchise tax is based on, is computed only on net worth. But for tax years ending on or before 12/31/2023, it used to be computed on the greater of net worth or the value of property owned and used in the state. So if you're a business that has been around for a couple years, you're still fairly new, you might have already heard about this if you are liable for franchise and excise tax. But if you're brand new and you're going to need F&E tax, so that means a LLC, a corporation, the franchise tax is computed on your net worth. Okay, excise tax is computed based on the net income or loss, hopefully not loss, but reality is net income or loss for the business. Okay, registering entities that are subject to F&E. We've already talked about this in the very beginning, but corporations, including S corps, LLCs, limited partnerships, real estate investment trusts, business trusts, entities not subject to F&E, sole proprietorships, general partnerships. Parent companies and subsidiaries do need to register and file separately. That's a little bit different than it's done in other states. And I have already mentioned this, but you are going to be subject to F&E from the date of formation or the date that operations began in Tennessee. Now, this is a long list of, I think there's 17 here, exempt entities that are exempt from F&E. Some of them are just exempt because of they don't have to provide anything. They just don't need to file F&E or register for F&E. Numbers 10 through 17 here, you have to apply for that exemption to be an exempt entity, and you need to renew that exemption every year. If you fail to renew by the deadline, we'll talk about deadlines here in a few minutes, then there is pretty hefty penalties. So I won't read through all of those, but yeah. Okay. Not going to talk a lot about out-of-state entities and nexus for a franchise excise tax right now either for time purposes, but if you're an out-of-state business and wonder if you need to register and file for F&E in Tennessee, then I'm going to refer you again to the to the Nexus webinar that I've talked about. So all out-of-state businesses that are here with us today, check out the Nexus webinar. Okay, filing F&E. So we've got a timeline here. This timeline assumes that an entity has a 12/31 fiscal year end. The franchise and excise return, you must either file and pay the return, file and pay an extension, or file and pay the minimum, which may be applicable. We'll talk about that by the 15th day of the fourth month. So for this timeline, a 12/31, a calendar year business is going to need to either file and pay the return, file for the extension, a valid extension, or pay that minimum by 4/15, by April 15th. F&E is one of the tax types that has an extension. It's maybe the only one that in Tennessee that has an extension. And it's a 7-month extension. That was a law change a few years ago. It used to be a 6-month extension. Now it's a 7-month extension. So for this timeline, again, assuming that a business has a calendar year end, that extension, as long as they meet the requirements for it, which we'll talk about, they have until November 15th to file. Certain businesses, depending on certain criteria that we'll discuss, are going to be required to file 4 estimated payments throughout the year. Some people call them quarterly payments, but that's a pet peeve of mine because they're not exactly quarterly. The first one is due on the 4th day of the 15th, the 15th day of the 4th month. The second one is due on the 15th day of the 6th month, so on and so forth down here. As you can see, for a calendar year end, you got a quarterly payment. Your first one's due on April 15th, then June 15th, then September 15th, and then your final estimated payment will be due on January 15th of the next year. Most people file for F&E through e-file certified vendor, modernized e-file, and the F&E return very closely aligns with your federal return. There's just a few differences. So if you're using modern e-file, if you're doing it yourself through TurboTax or one of those taxing platform, and when you put in that you're a Tennessee-based LLC, it'll ask you the right questions and file it for you. So okay, we're going to talk about how to get an extension. Well, I mentioned it's a 7-month extension, and it will be granted if the following happens before the due date. Either 90% payment of the current liability, and you might think, well, I don't know, I haven't filed it yet. I don't know what my current period liability is. Well, You need to do your best guess there. Or you can pay 100% of the previous period's liability, and that is annualized. That'll give you a valid extension. Or you can pay $100, a minimum, if the previous period does not exist. That may be the case for a lot of you new businesses. If you didn't have a period last year, but but your business was formed in 2024, you got April 15th looming. If you're not ready to file yet, you can pay $100 to get a valid extension. Once the financial requirement is paid, that extension is automatic. Now, if the amount paid, we'll talk about this a little more in a minute, is less than what you actually owe once you file the return, there will still be interest owed. If the amount paid in for that extension didn't quite cover what you actually are going to be liable for. All this can be done on TINTAP. These estimated payments that I talked about that are due 4 times a year, you're required to make estimated payments for F&E when you have a combined F&E liability of $5,000 or more for both this year and the prior year, for the current tax year, I'm sorry, and the prior tax year, $5,000 for each of those. Then you're going to need to file estimated payments. I am not going to spend a whole lot more time on this because of the amount of time that we have left, but I just want you to know that minimum filing, because this is going to apply to a lot of you, filing this minimum return is very easy to do if you have no income or assets. So brand new business, a minimum return is very easy to do without even logging into TINTAP. You just go to return links on TINTAP and click minimum $100 F&E tax, and it prompts you for a few more questions. This webinar is going to go into detail about the computation of the franchise tax, which is Schedule A, filing a final return when your business ends, excise tax, which is Schedule B, and all the different schedules that go along. That's why there's no way we're going to get into all this today. But if you are a business that is going to be liable for an F&E tax, your required homework is to watch the F&E webinar. Okay. Again, just like all the major tax types, we do have a great tax manual. A lot of businesses do choose to have a tax professional file their F&E returns. But like I said before, if you're the business owner, even if you're not the one doing the filing for this, you may file your own sales tax reports, you may file your own business tax return. Even if you get somebody else to file franchise and excise tax, please make sure that you as the business owner has the master level account access to all of your tax accounts. We do have over 24 tax accounts in Tennessee. Again, no income tax, so that's good, but lots of other taxes. Major ones that affect a lot of businesses are going to be liquor by the drink, maybe the tire fee, motor fuel, tobacco taxes. So I'm going to take you over real quick to show you just where all these individual tax web pages are. I've shown you, but I'm going to remind you where the manuals are. I'm going to remind you where the webinar video library is and where revenue help tax FAQs are. So going over back to our website, let's go to Revenue's homepage, tn.gov/revenue. You can either click on in the upper part here under taxes, but I like to use the tiles. I'm going to click on taxes. Every tax type we have is going to have its own page with more information about it. Okay, we've got the major ones that we've just talked a lot or a little about: business tax, franchise excise tax, and sales tax. I'm going to show you what the tax pages look like. Each one is going to be kind of similar to this, but have some differences, but you're going to see, if you're looking at this on a mobile device, it'll look a little bit differently, but there's going to be a sub menu on each tax page about due dates and rates, registration and licensing. For business tax, for example, there's more information about classes, retail wholesaler, but all of the tax pages are going to have additional tax guidance, which will take you to a link to the manual, to important notices, stuff like that. I'll just click on it so you see. Somebody earlier was asking me, where can I look and see if my city or town requires business license? Here is where that is, under business tax on the tax page. It's a few other places you can link over to it from the webinar and from the manual, but I'm on the business tax guidance link, and the last thing here says the city and county business tax dashboard. That's what I showed y'all earlier that I saw somebody in the chat ask about this, where you can hover over and see which municipalities within each jurisdiction have business tax. Okay. Business licensing and business tax. But anyways, also within each tax page, there are going to be applicable forms. This is where you can see a paper form. Filing is now available and required for all businesses on TINTAP, but sometimes it's helpful just to see the paper return. Certain things may, if you are a member of the Amish community, people like that can still use a paper return, but you have to get permission for that. But other forms, there's not a whole lot here for business tax, but watch this. If I go to the tax page for sales tax, wait till you see how many forms are there. So see how it's kind of set up similar, but a few different things. There's still due dates and tax rates on the sales tax page, registration, special stuff about local tax rates, single article, all that. Now let's look at the forms. There are a lot because a lot of these exemption forms are still paper forms, and I've heard rumor that we are working towards moving all of our applications for sales tax exemptions to being online or web-based through TINTAP, but that is just not the case right now. So there's a lot of forms there. I was going to show them, Billy, I think it's on here, that what that, if they ever get a government exemption, what that looks like.
Yeah, it's further down. Just keep scrolling down. Certificate of
The
government.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Billy said it
That's
kind
it.
of looks kind of like that. If you're ever handed this and somebody says they need a government exemption, all it's going to have is they have to list their agency and the date, and they have to sign it. So it's kind
But
of a
they do have
fill-in
to
one.
pay in government funds.
Yep. And like Billy said, only federal government, Tennessee state government, and local Tennessee local government. Somebody coming in from with a state of Virginia, they don't get a government exemption in our state. So those are the tax pages. For all the other tax types, I would let me just go all the way back to taxes here. I would look at this page and just think about what you do. If you want to call us and say, hey, here's what I do, what tax types do I need? But you may be able to figure it out yourself by looking at the types of taxes. Obviously, like for example, if you're going to sell alcohol or tobacco, there's going to be some other taxes. So check that out. So that's our tax page. Going back to the top here. I've already shown you where the webinars are, but I'm at the webinar library, but I'm going to show you one more time. The webinar video library from the home page, you click on taxpayer education and outreach, and then tax webinars. And you just got to scroll down, and there's all of our webinars. You can search there like you've seen me do, or search by category. I like to show all of them. Oh, what's going to happen when we reach more than 100, Billy? That's going to be crazy. Okay, so webinars, you know where those are. Great resource there. I've shown you where the tax manuals are, but I'm going to show you again. You can either click tax resources and guidance from the top bar, or you can go down to the tile. Oops, let me go back one. Let me just go back to the home page. tn.gov/revenue. Click on tax resources and guidance, or you can go to the tile that says tax resources and then click on guidance. And here are all of our manuals. I kind of wish there was a more direct link to our manuals. I don't get to make that decision, but here they are, tax manuals in all of their glory, our beautiful tax manuals that if you have a tax type in any of these manuals that we have manuals for, or if you're in a farmer, make sure you check that out. If you work in any of these industry specific areas, please check out those manuals. All right, so before we go to TINTAP, there's just one more place I'm going to take you from the Department of Revenue's homepage, and that is Revenue Help. Actually, that's kind of part of TINTAP. I'll just go ahead and show you though. Revenue Help. This is where we have a whole section dedicated to just TINTAP. That's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. Also a whole section dedicated to all the different taxes. These are FAQs or articles. You can see we've got lots. I mean, there's 20 articles just about alcohol taxes. 74 articles about business tax. I know that's probably really small for y'all to see, but these are articles. Different people learn and digest information in different ways. The webinars may be a good way for you to just spend an hour watching a webinar on a specific topic, or maybe you want to read about it. Maybe you want to, a lot of this information is the same information in multiple places. So now I'm going to go back over to the slides. Oh, there's a couple more things before I get over to the TINTAP stuff. I'm going to talk about delinquencies real quick. Hopefully this never happens to you because you're going to all be file and pay perfectly on time, but unfortunately something we do have to talk about is that there is such a thing as delinquencies. Penalties and interest do apply to any deficient or delinquent payments. Penalty is 5% of the unpaid amount for each month or partial month, and the max is 25% penalty. Interest is going to be computed at the current rate, which usually changes every July. There's a link here to what the current rate is, which right now is 12.5 is the interest rate. Unfortunately, you will get to the point where collections will be, a delinquent account will be turned over to collections after a certain amount of time. Something none of us want to think about, but I do recommend is checking out the webinar that's about the collection process. Just in a nutshell, if a payment or return is 30 days late, you're going to get a letter first from us that says it's called a notice of proposed assessment. That is not a bill. If you have not filed, don't just pay that. You need to actually file, because a lot of times that amount that we put on there is just an estimate. You could owe more, you could owe less, but you need to file. To be in compliance, you need to file. But that, we call it a NOPA. That happens after 30 days. If you have 30 days after you receive that to get right with us, to file and pay. If you don't, then you're going to get another letter from us that's called a final demand letter. At that point, it has been turned over to collections, and you'll be getting a call from collections. Way down the line, if things don't get resolved, there is a levy and lien process. You can have, we don't even want it to come to that, but you need to know that it's a possibility, and check out this webinar for more information on that. One more thing before we get to TINTAP is closing your business. Again, something you don't want to think about right now because you're a new business, but there is a certain protocol. You do have to notify us with any business ownership changes, especially closure. And closure includes even just closing a location and opening another one. There's steps to take. Licenses and permits surrendered. Bonds have to remain posted until outstanding liabilities are settled. Bonds are required for like alcohol and tobacco. So if you have sales tax account and a resale certificate, you have to notify your suppliers in writing that that certificate is no longer valid. And this is the most important, this last bullet here. All closures do require that businesses file a final tax return and remit taxes. You can't just close your business, say, I'm not in business anymore. There is a process. We do have a link to a web page dedicated because it's a little bit different for each tax type. There are some commonalities, like for most taxes, you have to notify us within 15 days of closing. Things are a little bit different with F&E because there's a liquidation process, since excise tax is based on, since F&E is based on like net worth and stuff. So we do have an upcoming webinar, which I'm excited to announce, coming up in June on closing your business. But if you don't want to think about that now, that's fine. You're excited about having a new business, but just know that it's there for when it comes time for you to close your business. Hopefully it will be after a long, successful business or when you retire, or both. Okay. Now we are going to talk about TINTAP, which I've mentioned to you a couple times. It's our online filing. It's kind of like online banking, but for your tax accounts. You can register for your tax accounts there. Electronic filing is available for all of our tax accounts now. We've kind of segued into that since 2018. Between 2018 and now everything is available except for, like I said, not all the sales tax exemptions and stuff is available, but filing the returns for all of our tax types is available on TINTAP. Some cool features: you can schedule payments in advance. For example, your sales tax return is not due until the 20th of the month following the period. If you have it all done and ready on the 1st of the month and want to just go ahead and file, that's cool. But you can schedule a payment to come out. I would be careful about having it come out right on the 20th. You can do that, but you want to be careful if that's a weekend or a holiday. But at any rate, you can schedule payments in advance. Great thing about TINTAP is that it will correct your common errors. Just like filling out any kind of form online, it'll be like, nope, can't go forward. You got to go back. You missed something. There'll be a little something with an asterisk that you didn't do. Most people are pretty familiar with that process. TINTAP is no different. It'll tell you when you've missed something or something's not lining up right. All right. You can amend returns. You can access all your returns, which can be very helpful. For example, when you're going to file your business tax return at the end of a full year, you can go back and pull up your sales tax returns from all 12 months and just get your business tax numbers from there. Just a little tip there. And much more. I've mentioned this a couple times, but all taxpayers should have access to the master TINTAP account. All business owners, I should say there. Again, if you've got a tax professional that is filing everything for you, you still need to have access. Last year on April 15th, I spoke to a taxpayer who was frantic because unfortunately their tax preparer had passed away like that week, just a few days before that, and they had access to nothing. I mean, that's just one of a lot of different circumstances that could happen with why you would want access. But also, I can't tell you how many times when I was working in our collections division that I got on the phone with a business owner and they said, well, I have an accountant that was supposed to be taking care of all that. Well, either there was a miscommunication there or something, but you want to be able to log in and see all of your tax accounts at a glance. And it's pretty simple. You can see if there's a balance on an account, you can see it in red. If there's alerts, you can see, and we're going to go over that in the next few slides. Again, I just showed you revenue help. There's a huge section on revenue help on TINTAP. And revenue help was, just to remind you, from the home page, I clicked on that tile that had a question mark on it and said revenue help. That's where I showed you all the different articles and FAQs. TINTAP has great articles. This is our TINTAP manual, actually, revenue help. Everything about some how-to videos, just general stuff about TINTAP, about creating a login and adding access. At this point, just creating a TINTAP login, people get confused about this. You'll create that login. It doesn't automatically, your accounts don't automatically show up. It's not like your bank account in that way. When you just first log into your bank account, you're going to see all your accounts associated with that bank, right? A savings account, a couple checking accounts. It's not like that with TINTAP. Once you log into TINTAP, you then have to go add access to your individual tax accounts. We can help you with that, or we do have a webinar for that. Registration, payments on TINTAP, returns, lots of great resources and information on revenue help. From TINTAP homepage, and that was a tile. TINTAP was a tile. I took you over there one time to show you how to check a resale certificate, but we'll go over there again in just a minute. From the TINTAP main page, you can see this little kind of chat bubble. That's called the TINTAP Assistant. That is a bot. It's not a live person. You can type in your question there, and it's a pretty smart bot, I will say. It will search our entire database for answers to your question, or if, like me, you want to if it's just not answering your question and you need help, at this point we don't have a live chat, but we do have a way to send us a message right then, and that is a message in writing where we have a team of employees here at Department of Revenue who will answer it creates a support ticket for us on our side, and we answer those. We have really strict metrics. We get to those fast during business hours. And I will say, if it's on a tax return due date, especially April 15th or one of the big ones, it might take a little bit longer to hear back from us, so don't procrastinate any questions. But sending a message through TINTAP Assistance is a great way. There's a couple other ways to send us a message as well that we'll go over in a bit. Once you log into TINTAP and have access to your accounts, this is what it's going to look like. When you first log into TINTAP and you don't have access to your accounts, you're not going to see accounts down here. See how it says business tax, franchise tax with some amounts there? When you first log in, you're not going to see that. You're just going to see your name. You're going to have to see this little bar right here, but you're not going to see any tax accounts. You have to add access to your tax accounts. There is a great article about that in Revenue Help under General TINTAP How-To videos, gain access to an account. That's where you'll go. And we also have a webinar, like I said, about that. But this is the way it looks. We're going to be focusing on this these tabs right here. They're not, I call them tabs, but these are the main places you can visit when you're in TINTAP. Again, at a glance though, you can see if you owed something on your business tax, you would see a negative amount there and it would be in red. All right, so that was what we call the summary page. Okay, that's the summary page. You can click directly over to make a payment. You view your file returns, view some additional actions for each tax account directly from this summary page. The next tab is Action Center. The Action Center is going to be any unread messages. I'm bad about this. I've told Billy this before. I'm bad about ignoring emails and even my mail. I'm looking at a stack right now of about 2 weeks worth of mail. I kind of go through it to see if there's anything that looks really important, and the rest of it I go through later. Some of you may be like me. Some of you may be right on the ball. At any rate, check your Action Center for unread messages. This is where important stuff is going to be, especially if you have not updated a mailing address with us by chance, and we mailed you something important to your physical mailing address or to your location, something that, the Postal Service lost it or something. Everything important will also be emailed to you. So you want to check messages there. This Action Center will also tell you if you've got a balance due or if you've got a return that is outstanding. So if you see a little superscript above Action Center, click on it and check it out. And of course, there's hyperlinks to take care of and fix whatever you need to fix there. Under More from the TINTAP Home, there is a ton of stuff here. This is where you can search in here for what it is you're looking to do if you can't figure it out. But you can manage accounts here. You can register a new account. You can add a location. You can gain access. That's where you gain access to your account. You'll need a few pieces of information from us before you can gain access to an account. Really, most information you would need would be in any kind of letter from us. So for all you new businesses, if you get a letter from us, it'll tell you that the upper right corner of that letter will tell you what tax type the letter is regarding. It'll have a letter ID and an account ID number. That's the information you need to be able to gain access. So this is all the information that you can see on on TINTAP More. All the letters, you can manage access, you can manage your, if you want an assistant at your business to be able to have access to certain aspects, to be able to just file maybe, you can give them access. If you do have a third party that handles certain things for you, you can grant them access, or you can remove access. If you are the master account holder, you hold that power here. Now, for those third-party tax professionals that are in here with us today, we do have a webinar dedicated to third-party access. Check that out. I think we did that about a year ago. Addresses, you can change your mailing address here, but I just want you to know when it comes to changing a location address, where your business is located, it's a little more complex than just logging into TINTAP. We have a webinar about that. I feel silly saying that so many times, but we have a webinar about that. But you can also call us and we'll guide you if you're moving. Maybe easier just to let us guide you through that. You can view all the letters. I have it kind of clipped off here, but at the bottom you see that you can view things that you have submitted to us through TINTAP More. One thing that happens sometimes is you think you have filed a return, but you really just saved it and you haven't yet filed it. But if you ever want to go back and see what happened, you can go into submissions. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to hang out on this page for just a minute, and then I'm going to also take you over to our webpage to show you how to submit, another way to submit a ticket. But for all businesses, we recommend that you do follow us in some way, shape, or form, just so you know, for such Facebook, Twitter, Instagram especially, we will let you know if we've got a webinar coming up, if we've got an office closure for some reason, or if our phone lines are down, stuff like that. Follow us. You can sign up for updates to get updates from Department of Revenue. Our YouTube page is where you can also see all of our other webinars, but I think the webinar video library is better. Emailing us. So remember I showed you the TINTAP Assistant, how you can search that bot for answers or say send a message. That's one way to send us a message. Another way is just to email us at revenue.support@tn.gov. both of those get routed to the same place. They get emailed to our group of staff that highly trained in cream of the crop, I like to say, at answering your questions. And a lot of people like to do that. That way you get an answer in writing. I'm going to go ahead and for the last 10 minutes here, open up chat again. Okay, chat's open. Again, you can call us. This is our general tax line, 615-253-0600. But I'm going to show you two things. I'm going to show you where other contact information is regarding some more honed in things. Here's Revenue's homepage. At the bottom in the footer here, either click on contact us or department contact information. That's going to be where you can also send us an email that gets routed to the same way as if you send us revenue.support@tn.gov. General call center, if you're a tax practitioner, so for more complex F&E questions, there is a separate line. Of course, we also handle vehicle title and registration. That doesn't really apply to tax stuff, but if you're in collections, here is a way to contact our collections people for liens releases, collections, and they have a separate phone number too. If you are under audit, here's some audit contact information. If you'd like to request a penalty waiver, you can, if you see a if you see a blue link here, that's a way to email the group. So you can email about penalty waivers. If you've requested a refund, there's a special number there. So just some special ways to get in touch with us. We do have some regional offices located throughout the state. If you need to go in for specialized help, you do need to request an appointment for going into one of our offices. It's basically just a little thing, a little form you fill out here, and we're happy to help you in office if we cannot help you over the phone or in any other ways. Okay. Let's see. Billy, I'm going to stay here on the website. I can't see the chat questions when I'm over here, but I thought it'd probably be better to stay here since some questions might pertain to me bouncing around to some places on the
Okay.
website.
All right. I was just answering a couple of people in chat here as far as that goes. Let's say Tim, a bit confused about what's a valid location as a business manager, pay bills, process payroll, da 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 da. Would my office be considered a valid location for your clients? Sure, absolutely.
Wait, is the
Is
person,
that where
is
your
Tim,
books and records are kept?
is
Yeah, I
Tim
think
an
so.
accountant? Is he an accountant? And he's talking about his
He's a
clients?
business manager.
Okay, for other businesses.
Yeah,
Okay, so those businesses need their actual location
right,
as their address, but maybe he could be a mailing location for them.
right. And he
Yeah.
for his own business would use his
Yes.
own
Yeah.
home office location address for
Yep.
his business. That's right. Yeah, great question. So somebody says, will there be a reply link or a replay link? Oh,
Oh,
I guess
yes.
that means, are we going to post this recording?
Yes, we
Yes,
are.
it's
Good
going, it'll
question.
be out here later this afternoon or tomorrow.
Yep. I'm going to click on taxpayer education and then new business workshops. This is the last one that we did last October.
Yeah, and we'll
Starting
take that
tomorrow.
one down, and
Yeah.
the one today will go up.
Yep, the one we do have a Spanish version of this. It's can't remember when we did this one. It was
It's not been that
maybe a
long
year or
ago.
so. It hadn't been that long ago. We might need to redo that soon. But yeah, that's where tomorrow, later today or tomorrow, you'll see today's recording on this new business workshop page, which, just to show you one more time, is from our homepage, from revenue, tn.gov/revenue, click on taxpayer education and outreach, and then new business workshops. Does it make you
Right.
dizzy when I'm scrolling through all this, or?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want
Um,
everybody to know where everything is, because I
I'm
just,
speaking for the group. We're starting to feel like we're at the carnival.
should I go
So,
slower? Okay. All right. What's next?
so I was just going to reiterate one thing that you said not too long ago, Katie, about correspondence. When we send letters to you, there's a reason, and it's because there's something that's weird. Almost, unless we're sending you like a certificate or something that you registered for or whatever. So don't ignore it. I had a person literally tell me one time, I didn't know what it was. It was from the government. So since I didn't know what it was, I just threw it away. Well, don't do that.
Yeah.
Please, open it up, look at it. It says, oh, $1,000. Well, guess what? I'm gonna call somebody or send somebody an
Yeah.
email before I spend $1,000. Aren't
That
you?
could be one of those estimates. That could be because something's wrong. You got
Right.
registered incorrectly.
Don't just pay
Yeah.
it. For
And don't
goodness
just think
sake.
they're wrong. I don't know them anything. I'm gonna throw this away. I haven't even started my business yet. I don't know
Right.
anything. No,
Then you
call
end
us.
up in collections and you
Yeah.
have angst. So don't do that. Communicate and react to what you see. Okay. And you'll be fine. Hey, guess what? We make mistakes here too. All right. Sometimes we don't hit the right button. Sometimes we send out letters that are incorrect. We'll fix it. Sometimes you just don't know. Um, you know, there's no sin in being ignorant of a situation. That's why you're here today. You're here to learn, right? So when something goes awry because you made a mistake, let's fix it. Okay. Let's talk about how you can get a penalty waiver in certain cases when you make a mistake. But let's make sure that you understand your obligations. When you're registered, you are filing, you are paying. Even if you're not paying because you don't have anything to pay, you still got to file.
Hmm.
Um, Going back to franchise and excise for just a second, when you're an LLC, when you're a corporation, a PLLC, whatever you are that's a corporate entity, you must register with the Secretary of State and with us, and you are going to owe at least $100 a year, whether you do anything with your quote business or not. Okay. We just sent out, y'all, honestly, swear on the Bible that we sent out 40,000 letters over the last month to people who were delinquent for their franchise and excise return for 2023.
Wow.
That's a lot, y'all. That's a lot. Okay. We are finding that a lot of these were just not registered correctly. So we fix those. Okay. We're still working with taxpayers who just didn't know. They thought, well, I set this up and I didn't know what I was doing. Do I still owe this? The answer is yeah, you do. Okay. So be real careful before you pull the trigger and set up your business. So if you're just thinking about this, you're not in business yet, before you talk to your buddy down the street that says that you should be an LLC, you need to really be sure you need to be an LLC. You might be perfect for you, might not. Okay. So Katie went over some of the other resources before from like SCORE and the small business development centers and stuff like that. There's a lot of other resources besides the old tax department to um, to get you some help on that too. Okay. Uh, Katie, can you walk us to the farmer's exemption manual, or not the exemption, but the farmer's tax manual?
Manual, sure.
Yeah, somebody said they can't find it.
Okay. So from the top, tn.gov/revenue. I'm going to go to it by clicking on the tax resources tile right here, tax
Hmm.
resources, and then you click on tax guidance, and then tax manuals. And it's the
And there's all the manuals,
third
and
one,
there's farmers,
farmers. Yeah, it doesn't, yeah, farmers, nursery operators, and timber harvesters.
and then there you go.
It's a great manual. Then we have a webinar about the ag exemption as well.
Yes, yes. And I'm just trying to see what else we have questions about. So for a new business, it's the first F&E tax due on the current April 15th of the next year. So if you form this year in 2025, then it's not due until April 15th of 26. Okay. Now, another thing too, if you formed your LLC or your other corporate entity late in 24 and you delayed your effective date until like January 1st, that pushes you out another year also. So there's a few tricks to that as far as that goes. But if you're confused about that, you probably want to start with the Secretary of State's office to see how you registered before on that, because it's really important to make sure that the records match, that your tax records match what the Secretary of State says. Okay.
So Bryson has a question here. Where can I find clarification on if we owe taxes for making under 100K? Now, that's kind of that's from Bryson. That's a little bit complex. We're talking different tax types. For business tax, that may be what you're referring to. For business tax, if you make under 100K, you do not owe business tax. But if you already have a business tax account, and you didn't make under 100K, you need to reach out to us. That's the only way we're going to know that you want to not have to file is if you reach
Right.
out to us. Franchise and excise tax doesn't have anything to do with thresholds. It's if you are LLC or corporation or corporate entity, then you owe F&E, no matter if you didn't make a penny or not. Sales tax, that threshold was a little bit different too. So I'm going to refer you back to, there's three big ones: business tax, sales tax, and franchise and excise. There's
Mhm.
each one of those three tax types has a webinar about the basics of it. It's worth it for you to take the time to watch each of those just to get the basics again. And unfortunately, we're out of time here for today. We had hundreds of people in here today, so we're no way we could get around to all the questions, but I hope that we have provided you with some resources to either research your question or reach out to us, call us, email us, open up a support ticket, and we'll get to your question. We do have some upcoming webinars: Liquor by the Drink, exemptions for military members, business tax deductions in March, and then wineries, distilleries, and breweries coming up in April. And then a direct link over to our webinar video library. So just want to thank you all for being here today. You have made an important step in showing that you care enough about your business to be here. And I hope that you've taken away something at least that will help you run your business smoothly. You've got enough stuff to worry about rather than, you know, tax compliance. So hopefully
And
this
if we
took a
did
little
not
bit of
get to your
guesswork.
question, make sure you send us that email or give us a
Yes.
phone call so
Yep.
that we can help you. Okay. Don't just let it go. Let's make sure that we've tried to help you every way we can. Okay.
All
So
right,
thank you very
everyone.
much, guys.
Thank you all so much. Thanks, Billy, for everything, and good luck to you all with your
Thanks, everybody.
businesses, and
Okay.
stay warm. We've got a big snowstorm coming this weekend, so here in Tennessee. So stay warm. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again, guys. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.